Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave Chapter 261. Luo Kyungsu is a traitor? Is the falling of leaves the pursuit of the wind or the unwillingness of the tree to hold back? A lifeless puppet, like a monk sitting cross-legged on a meat futon, stared at the nearest Zhao Zixuan with a pair of empty eyes. The sound coming out of its mouth carries a hint of cold desolation, which makes people tremble in their hearts. Teach, instructor. Zhao Zixuan was so scared that she instinctively took 2 steps back and looked at Lan Tianbei not far away for help. While she took 2 steps back, the puppet in front also slid forward 2 steps, following her closely with a sense of oppression. Is the falling of leaves the pursuit of the wind or the unwillingness of the tree to hold back? Seeing that Zhao Zixuan didn't answer, the puppet asked again in a hoarse voice. While the second question was being asked, the puppet's eyes became increasingly hollow, and there was a trace of black energy lingering all over his body, filled with a somewhat strange sense of oppression. Lin Zichen noticed the changes in the puppet, and immediately looked at Zhao Zixuan and shouted. Answer its question quickly. He didn't understand the puppet before him. But considering that he had previously bombarded the cage with the power of his energy and blood, and could only leave some insignificant marks on the cage, he estimated that he would definitely not be able to hurt the puppet in front of him. Under this consideration, instead of attacking the puppet rashly, it is better to follow the puppet and wait and see what happens. After hearing Lin Zichen's reminder, Zhao Zixuan calmed down a little. She looked at the puppet in front of her, stabilized her slightly uneasy mood, and then replied. The falling of leaves is caused by both the wind's pursuit and the tree's unwillingness to retain it. It is the result of the two-way interaction. After answering, Zhao Zixuan stared at the puppet in front of her with an uneasy expression, her heart in her throat. The same was true for the others, all of them were so nervous that they didn't even dare to blink. The puppet, who was being watched by everyone, remained motionless and silent, like a computer that had crashed. About 2 seconds passed. Several clicking sounds came from the puppet's throat, and then he said lifelessly. Wrong answer. The moment the sound falls, the puppet that was originally sitting cross-legged on the ground suddenly decomposed into a large number of bloody roots, turning into a giant net and covering Zhao Zixuan in front. Then, before everyone could react, Zhao Zixuan, who was still standing just now, was instantly entangled in a giant net and turned into an airtight cicada. She was pulled to the top of the cage by a vine and hung high, looking like a hanged corpse. Zixuan! An alien-level genius shouted, reacting very quickly and attacking the vines to save Zhao Zixuan. The method of attack is to throw out the double-edged sword full of energy and blood in the hand with force to cut off the vine connected to the cicada pupa. Unfortunately, the vines are extremely tough. When the double-edged sword was struck on them, not only did they fail to cut off the vines, but they also shattered their own blades. Soon. Just listen to bang bang several times. A large number of bloody roots burst out of the ground and attacked the alien genius who threw the double-edged sword at a speed that was invisible to the naked eye. They instantly entangled him into a cicada and pulled him to the top of the cage to hang. After seeing this scene, everyone present took a breath of air and felt despair in their hearts. The enemies in the cage are much stronger than expected. The chance of escape was slim. While everyone else was in despair, Lin Zichen seemed unusually calm. He was thinking about what he could do to take Shen Qinghan out of the prison. On your own? Disaster. Tried it in the beginning. A ball of energy and blood was gathered together and hit the cage without any splash at all. If nothing else, the strength of the cage reaches an epic level. By the way, can the biological attribute of fire breath be broken? Lin Zichen suddenly thought of this. This was a biological attribute he had acquired by devouring corpses at the forefront of the battlefield. It is a biological attribute of fire attribute. From the perspective of the theory of the 5 elements, it should be possible to restrain alien plants. But it's just a theory, and the specifics are still unknown. Wait some more. If you are really in a desperate situation, use this biological attribute to fight to the death. Lin Zichen thought to himself. At this moment, he did not dare to take action rashly, fearing that his action would be ineffective and anger the prisoner. Boom! Suddenly, there was a sound of landing. Another lifeless puppet fell to the ground from the top of the cage, splashing up large pieces of dead branches and leaves. Under the horrified gaze of everyone, the puppet soon sat cross-legged on the ground, twisted its neck and looked at the nearest Lan Tianbei, asking with empty eyes. Is the falling of leaves the pursuit of the wind or the unwillingness of the tree to hold back? Hearing this familiar question, Lan Tianbei's face suddenly became serious. He recalled Zhao Zixuan's answer, saying that it was the combined action of the wind and the tree that caused the leaves to fall. This answer is wrong. As a result, Zhao Zixuan was entangled by the blood-colored roots, turned into a cicada, and was pulled into the air and hung. Is the falling of leaves the pursuit of the wind or the unwillingness of the tree to hold back? Because Lan Tianbei didn't answer in time, the puppet asked a question that hit his soul for the second time. When he asked, the black aura lingering on his body became stronger and stronger. It seems that as long as Lan Tianbei doesn't answer quickly, the puppet will attack him. Lan Tianbei realized this and didn't dare to continue thinking silently. After thinking for a while, he looked at the puppet in front of him and answered. The falling of leaves is the pursuit of the wind. If there is no pursuit of the wind, the leaves will not fall, because the tree will not let go. This answer was given in a desperate situation. Lan Tianbei didn't know what the correct answer was. But time was running out, so he could only choose an angle to answer the puppet. Wrong answer. The puppet said hoarsely. As soon as the voice fell, the puppet decomposed into a large number of terrifying blood-colored roots on the spot, and suddenly covered Lan Tianbei. Lan Tianbei's strength was much stronger than Zhao Zixuan. At the moment the blood-colored roots appeared, he had already reacted and attacked, making the final resistance. Unfortunately, no matter how fast the reaction speed was, once the strength was not enough, it would be useless. In just a blink of an eye, Lan Tianbei was entangled by the blood-colored roots into a cicada pupa, and was pulled to the top of the cage by a vine and hung high. Seeing that even Lan Tianbei was attacked without any ability to fight back, everyone present showed despair. They didn't expect that they would perish in this cramped cage just after the battle began. The falling of leaves, is it the pursuit of the wind, or the unwillingness of the tree to keep them? Another puppet fell down, staring at Wu Xia with empty eyes and asked. Wu Xia is Fu Zhou's girlfriend. Last time, she and Fu Zhou took Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan out for training and familiarized themselves with the environment outside the city. The falling of leaves is the unwillingness of the tree to keep them. Leaves that can be seduced by the wind are not worth keeping. Wu Xia was a little panicked, but she still gave such a pre-thought answer calmly. The joint action of wind and tree has been answered. The pursuit of wind has been answered. Now only the unwillingness of the tree to keep them has not been answered. Wu Xia has a certain degree of confidence in her answer. However, ideals are beautiful, and reality is very skinny. With Wu Xia having a certain degree of confidence, the puppet in front of her said murderously, wrong answer. How could it be? Wu Xia's eyes widened, feeling unacceptable. The puppet didn't care whether she could accept it or not. The moment it said wrong answer, it immediately decomposed into a large number of blood-colored roots and suddenly enveloped her. Xia. Seeing this, Fu Zhou instinctively shouted out, and at the same time burst out all his blood and energy to save Wu Xia. The result was that both of them were entangled into a cicada pupa and pulled to the top of the cage and hung. The falling of leaves, is it the pursuit of the wind, or the unwillingness of the tree to keep it? A brand new puppet fell from a high altitude, just like the previous puppets, asking this question to the person closest to him. And this time, this person was Shen Qinghan. Under the death gaze of the puppet, Shen Qinghan's heart was panicked. She habitually looked at Lin Zichen on the side and cast a look for help to Lin Zichen. Lin Zichen's mind worked very fast. The three people before all answered the puppet's question from a literary perspective. If we change the perspective and answer from a scientific perspective, will the problem be solved? Lin Zichen didn't know if he was right. But in this situation, there was no other way but to give it a try. He could only try his best. Hanin, answer with scientific thinking and the biological knowledge you have learned. Lin Zichen looked at Shen Qinghan seriously and said. Shen Qinghan quickly searched for theoretical knowledge related to falling leaves in his mind, striving to give a nearly perfect scientific answer to get himself out of trouble. Is the falling of leaves the pursuit of the wind or the unwillingness of the tree to keep them? Soon, the puppet began to ask the second question. At this time, Shen Qinghan had already drafted a perfect scientific answer in his mind. When the puppet asked the second question, she immediately answered. The falling of leaves is neither the pursuit of the wind nor the unwillingness of the tree to keep them, but abscisic acid. When the cold winter comes, plants reduce their own. Wrong answer. Before Shen Qinghan could answer much, she was suddenly interrupted by the puppet. Then in the next second, the puppet decomposed into a large number of scarlet blood-colored roots on the spot, attacking Shen Qinghan like extremely disgusting red worms. Seeing the disgusting blood-colored roots rushing towards her, Shen Qinghan's pretty face turned pale, and a trace of despair appeared in her eyes. Buzz. A sharp sound of breaking through the air sounded. Lin Zichen, who was beside him, rushed towards the blood-colored roots rushing towards Shen Qinghan at the fastest speed in his life, wanting to violently fight against these extremely tough existences. Boom. Bang. Boom 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 bang. When Lin Zichen and the bloody roots collided, the entire cage suddenly erupted with waves of terrifying sounds, shaking the eardrums of everyone present. The attack was very strong. The movement was very loud. But the strength of the bloody roots was beyond imagination. No matter how Lin Zichen attacked, he could only block the bloody roots at most, and could not destroy them at all. After a few attempts, Lin Zichen realized that he could not deal with the bloody roots by brute force. So he thought about it, and with the blessing of high spirit and absolute concentration, he used the biological attribute flame breath on the bloody roots in front of him. The next second, a ball of red flame suddenly spurted out from Lin Zichen's mouth and nose, and blasted towards the blood-colored roots in front of him like a volcanic eruption. As soon as these red flames came out, they instantly ignited the extremely tough blood-colored roots, burning them like venomous snakes that were scared and twisting in pain in the air. It works. Flame breath. This biological attribute can really restrain demon plants. Lin Zichen was slightly excited, and immediately increased the force to spit out red flames, wanting to burn the blood-colored roots in front of him and even the entire cage into ashes. On the other side, everyone else present was dumbfounded and completely confused. He can actually spit fire? Why can he spit fire? What is going on? Hallucination? Everyone was puzzled by this. However, at this moment, they did not dwell on this point too much. Because they all knew one thing very clearly. Lin Zichen can cause damage to the blood-colored roots, which means that they all have hope of escape. About a few seconds later, Lin Zichen consumed a huge amount of mental power, spraying his entire head until it was red-hot, and finally burned the bloody roots in front of him into ashes. However, he did not stop spraying fire, but sprayed more and more. Use the red flames to focus on a position in front of him. A big hole must be broken at this position so that everyone in the cage can escape. The red flames do have a fatal restraint on plants. In just a few seconds, the indestructible barrier was burned with a fist-sized hole. According to this trend, it only takes more than 10 seconds to burn a hole for people to escape quickly. Just when everyone thought that escape was in sight. Suddenly, a burst of intoxicating fragrance floated out of the cage, lingering on everyone's nose. Before everyone could react to what was going on. Suddenly, Luo Qingxiu, who had been standing silently in the crowd, focused her eyes and entered the elemental state, turning into a large ball of extremely cold ice gas, rushing to the place where Lin Zichen was spraying fire at the fastest speed. Buzz! Accompanied by the sound of a burst of ice gas passing by. Under the unbelievable eyes of the crowd, the place where Lin Zichen was spraying and burning was instantly frozen into an ice wall by the ice gas, an indestructible ice wall. No matter how the red flames sprayed by Lin Zichen burned, the ice wall showed no signs of melting. At this moment, Lin Zichen was stunned and couldn't understand what was going on for a while. He couldn't figure out what Luo Qingxiu was doing. Even more, he couldn't figure out why his flame breath could be blocked by Luo Qingxiu. Luo Qingxiu's biological level was obviously only advanced level 7. And his biological level was as high as rare level 3. Could it be that Luo Qingxiu was an undercover agent hiding his strength and lurking in city number 1? After some doubtful thinking, Lin Zichen looked at the ice wall in front of him that could easily block flame breath, and the most likely guess flashed through his mind. P.S. Put the bowl on the table, and ask for monthly votes and recommendation votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 262 Shen Qinghan and number 039, S Identity. Water God Palace. Just when Lin Zichen suspected that Luo Qingxiu was an undercover agent lurking in the city. Buzz. A sound of breaking through the air rang out. The only two rare-level members in the team, Zhao Qingxian and Zhang Tao, suddenly burst out with blood and energy and attacked Lin Zichen. Lin Zichen's 5 senses were extremely sensitive. The moment the two people just made a move, he immediately noticed their attack. Facing the attack of the two, he just calmly focused his eyes and burst out a terrifying biological pressure with a crushing momentum. The next second, 2 bangs came. Zhao Qingxian and Zhang Tao were instantly suppressed to the ground by this powerful biological pressure, and their bodies were completely sunk deep into the hard ground, and countless shocking cracks were shaken on the edge. One wave just subsided, and another wave rose. The next moment after Lin Zichen dealt with Zhao Qingxian and Zhang Tao, other extraordinary geniuses in the team also attacked him, including the timid Shen Qinghan. Shen Qinghan just had an idea. The next second, she pulled out a large amount of groundwater under her feet, forming a 100-meter-long dragon that covered the sky and the sun, just like Yuan Dongji did in the coastal forest. It suddenly crashed into Lin Zichen. It was not until then that Lin Zichen realized that Shen Qinghan and others were controlled. He recalled the fragrance he had just smelled. If nothing unexpected happened, that fragrance should be the culprit that controlled everyone. Although he found the problem, Lin Zichen didn't know what to do to wake up the people controlled by the fragrance. Helplessly, he could only secrete a large amount of venom that could paralyze the nerves on his body surface, poisoning all the people who attacked him to the ground. When all this was done, bang! A huge flower bud broke out of the ground, with a hint of light blue mist, exuding a pleasant fragrance. It was this fragrance. Lin Zichen instantly became alert, his whole body bursting with blood, staring at the mysterious flower bud that suddenly appeared in front of him. Hiss! A crisp cracking sound rang out. The huge mysterious flower bud had a crack several fingers wide on its surface, and a large amount of rich fragrance seeped out from it, filling the entire cage. Lin Zichen was nervous, and his eyes did not dare to deviate at all, always staring at the flower bud in front of him. Under his gaze, the crack on the flower bud opened wider and wider, until it bloomed into an extremely charming blue flower. revealing a woman with vines wrapped around her body. Lin Zichen, you are not only physically strong, but also have incredible means. You must have some unknown secrets hidden in you. The flower vine girl had a charming look in her eyes and said softly with a seductive smile. Lin Zichen frowned and kept looking at the flower vine girl. He didn't remember that he knew such a strong person. The flower vine girl saw what he was wondering about, and smiled. You are now well known in the Sun and Moon Holy Land. The creatures there want to take you back to sacrifice to the flower god. The flower god? A mythical creature in the Sun and Moon Holy Land? What does sacrifice mean? Is it to be a bed slave? Or to take my life? In just a short moment, Lin Zichen had thought so much in his mind, and finally blurted out a question. What does sacrifice mean? It means sacrifice. The flower vine girl made an orchid finger, with a smile on her face. After that, she continued in a gentle voice, okay, enough nonsense, the flower god's sacrifice, we should go. The moment the words fell, the hair on the flower vine girl's body suddenly stretched into blue vines, and attacked Lin Zichen like an octopus's tentacles, trying to pull him into the flower bud and take him away. Facing this sudden attack, Lin Zichen did not sit and wait for death, but instantly raised his mental strength to the maximum, launching flame breath to spray at the attacking vines. Soon, the red flames and blue vines fiercely collided with each other, and the terrifying aftermath exploded and blew away everything around. After just a moment, Lin Zichen could not withstand the explosive power of the vines, and the whole person was blown away, hitting the root wall of the cage heavily, and spitting out a large mouthful of blood. The strength of the flower vine girl is extremely strong, if not epic, it is close to epic. Lin Zichen, whose biological level is only rare level 3, can't resist the attack of the flower vine girl at all. You resisted my attack, but you just spit out a little blood, there is no other problem. Your body is really strong. I believe that the flower god will like it very much. The flower vine girl said with a smile. After that, she controlled more vines to wrap Lin Zichen, who was still spitting blood on the ground, into a cicada pupa and pulled him into the huge flower bud. Before leaving, the flower vine girl glanced at the alien geniuses lying on the ground, and looked regretful. These are all the top geniuses on Earth. Their evolutionary talents are extremely outstanding. If I can bring them all back to the Holy Land and make them a member of the Holy Land, then I will definitely get the highest reward from the Holy Lord. However, the flower bud has limited capacity and cannot take away so many earthlings. It's really a pity. Thinking of this, the flower vine girl controlled a blue vine covered with thorns and whipped these alien geniuses on the ground. These future Earth powerhouses who have not yet grown up must be completely strangled in this cage. Buzz. The vines waved extremely fast, causing a burst of explosions in the air, aiming directly at the alien-level geniuses on the ground. Just listen to a bang sound. The vines covered with spikes took the lead in hitting the nearest young man, Xiaolu. The moment the sound of the blow was heard, Xiaolu, whose biological level reached the 9th level of the advanced perfection, exploded and turned into bloody water that spread all over the ground, completely disappearing from this world. After killing Xiaolu, the vines swept aside, aiming directly at Shen Qinghan lying on the ground. Just when the vines were about to hit Shen Qinghan's fragile-looking body. Boom! The ground beneath Shen Qinghan suddenly exploded like an inflated balloon. Then, a large amount of groundwater spurted out from below, wrapping Shen Qinghan on the ground in it to form an airtight water film. Bang! The vines hit the water film fiercely with the overwhelming force of Mount Tai. Then, the water film and Shen Qinghan, who was protected by the water film, were not beaten into a pool of blood as expected. On the contrary, the vine itself was instantly shaken into pieces by the soft and weak-looking water film. Hui Teng girl, who witnessed this scene with her own eyes, opened her eyes wide and couldn't believe what she saw. My vines are of epic strength, how could they not even be able to penetrate a layer of water film? What the hell is going on? Hannah Fengnu was puzzled by this and wondered if she was hallucinating. Calm down your mind a little. The flower vine girl once again controlled a vine and swung it towards Shen Qinghan in the water film. Bang! There was such a familiar sound again. The vines whipped hard against the water film, which was instantly shattered into sawdust on the ground. This time, Hui Tengnu was finally willing to believe the facts in front of her. The water film on Shen Qinghan's body can easily withstand a full blow from an epic creature. What is that water film? What about the earth girl in the water film? It's incredible. The flower vine girl curiously looked at Shen Qinghan in the water film, and realized that what happened at this moment was beyond her knowledge. This made her hesitate. He was hesitating whether to take Lin Zichen away or take Shen Qinghan who was in the water film. Lin Zichen is special, that's for sure. But Shen Qinghan seemed to be even more special than Lin Zichen at the moment, which made her feel in trouble, and she didn't know how to make a decision for a while. Just when it was difficult for her to make a choice, the floor of the cage began to seep water at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant, the originally slightly dry ground seeped into a wetland full of water. Hui Tengnu had never seen such a strange scene before, and she suddenly became cautious. She no longer hesitated to take Lin Zichen away or Shen King Han, she closed the flower bud directly and chose to take the risk-free Lin Zichen away and sacrifice him to the great flower god. But the next second the bud was completely closed. The flower vine girl's expression changed slightly, and she found in disbelief that her flower buds could not escape into the ground and lead directly to the Holy Land far away in the horizon. What's going on? Why can't I teleport away? With this doubt, the flower vine girl frowned and opened the bud, wanting to see what was going on outside the bud that could prevent the bud from teleporting away. Soon, the buds opened. The moment the flower buds opened, a large amount of cold water poured in from the outside, directly bursting the epic level flower buds into several petals. Seeing that her bud was actually bursting from the water, the bud girl's face was full of shock, and she suspected that she was under an illusion and had hallucinations. The strength of my own flower bud is as high as the second level of epic. How could it be possible to burst out of just mediocre water? The flower vine girl tried to calm down her mind and used her mental power to sense the surrounding environment. It was okay if I didn't feel it, but when I felt it, I was shocked. Kaitonu was horrified to find that she was not in a familiar cage, but in a completely unfamiliar underwater world. Am I being teleported? When? When was I transported here? Why don't I feel anything? The flower vine girl was extremely frightened when she thought about it. The more she thought about it, the more frightened she became. Since evolving into an epic creature, she has rarely been so panicked, and has always been a presence that makes other creatures panic. But at this moment, she was inexplicably transported to a completely unfamiliar environment, which made her feel panic for the first time in a long time, and she didn't know what to do for a while. Is there a palace ahead? Why is there a palace here? Under the continuous perception of mental power, Hui Tengnu quickly sensed a majestic palace a few miles away in front of her. The palace was huge, so big that it was incredible for the flower vine girl. She didn't understand why there was a palace in this underwater world. Did I wander into a ruins by mistake? Flower vine girl suddenly thought of this possibility. In less than a second, the panic and disbelief that I felt just now turned into excitement and excitement. I just wanted to come to the battlefield to capture someone and take him back. Unexpectedly, there would be an unexpected surprise, and I actually entered a ruins. Here in the origin, being able to enter the ruins means that you have a high chance of obtaining a large amount of special evolutionary resources. Obtaining a large amount of evolutionary resources means that your biological level can be further improved. Thinking of this, Hui Tengnu didn't hesitate for a moment, and immediately swam towards the giant palace a few miles ahead as quickly as possible. The speed was so fast that it directly stirred up large turbulent undercurrents in the water. Less than half a second. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. The flower vine girl walked several miles and came to the front of the palace. Behind her, there was a cicada pupa connected by vines. Inside the cicada, Lin Zichen, who was controlled by her, was wrapped. Water God Palace. Flower vine girl looked at the palace door plaque and saw these three characters on it. Just as she was looking at the palace carefully. Crunch! A thick wooden sound sounded. The palace door opened. The flower vine girl was alert for a moment and immediately opened a large distance as fast as possible, not daring to approach the open gate of the palace easily. As an epic-level powerhouse, she has been to the ruins several times before and knows that places like the ruins not only have opportunities but also come with a lot of dangers. If you rush in rashly, your body will disappear within minutes, becoming one of the evolutionary resources in the ruins. You're here. Just when Hui Tengnu was thinking about how to enter the palace to find out what was going on, a faint female voice suddenly came from inside the palace, causing ripples to ripple outside the palace. Hearing the words "you're here," Hui Tengnu was filled with doubts. What does this mean? What brings me here? The devil's whisper, luring me in? Flower vine girl was very cautious and did not get lured in by the sounds coming from the palace. God! The great God! Please give us strength! Inside the palace, there was a cry of awe. Listening to these shouts, the doubts in Hui Tengnu's heart became more and more serious, and she became more and more curious and vigilant about the situation inside the palace. She had entered several ruins, but this was the first time she encountered a ruin where voices kept coming from. God! Great God! God! You finally responded to us! God! Finally appeared! Suddenly, the voices in the palace became extremely excited. A little less awe, a little more excited. The sound was so loud that the water outside the palace stirred up waves and surged inside. Lin Zichen, who was in the cicada, heard the excited shouts coming from the palace outside, and regained some consciousness in a daze. He slowly opened his eyes and found that he was in an absolutely dark space, and his body was tightly bound and unable to move. The only thing he could do at the moment was listen to the shouts coming from outside. Was I taken to the Holy Land of the Sun and Moon? What is the god outside? Flower god? Lin Zichen frowned, thinking constantly in his mind. At the same time, other side. The flower vine girl was filled with doubts as she listened to the excited shouts that kept coming from the palace. The palace in front of me is really weird. It doesn't feel like a lifeless ruin, but a small world full of life. As the sound in the palace became louder and louder. Soon, a weak figure slowly rose from the palace. Hui Tengnu immediately noticed this fragile figure. When she saw the figure's appearance clearly, she couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. That weak figure was actually the girl from Earth who was wrapped in the water film before. P.S. Set the bowls, please recommend monthly tickets. End of chapter. Chapter 263 Water God? Pollution God. Qi Qingmo in the ruins. A high sky thousands of miles away from the city. Nearly 10 legendary creatures fought fiercely, each showing their magical powers, causing the world to change color. Suddenly, a dazzling scorching sun radiated in all directions, burning the land within 100 miles into ashes. Among the ashes, there was a giant tree that reached the sky and was filled with a lot of black energy. It remained unscathed no matter how the hot sunlight burned it. It is the black energy that protects the giant tree that reaches the sky. The black air absorbed the sunlight, preventing the giant tree from burning. Rumble. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. Dozens of shocking huge cracks opened on the ground, and strands of icy black air seeped out. The next second, a large number of unspeakable black shadows crawled out from the depths of the cracks, forming a huge undead army and swarming towards Qin Chuan and other city leaders at high speed. Upon seeing this, Shang Guanyuehua, the deputy city lord, immediately controlled the movement of the entire land with a thought, and forcibly closed the cracks above. As soon as the crack closed, countless thick thorns broke out of the ground and rose into the sky, leaving the closed ground riddled with holes. Black air seeped out again, forming a new undead force. Legion. Oh, just a low-level undead. Qin Chuan sneered, and then his deep eyes glowed with golden light, causing the scorching sun hanging above his head to erupt with even more powerful heat. In an instant, a golden flash of light illuminated the earth, dispersing all the black energy, incinerating the undead army that crawled out of the cracks, turning it into nothingness and completely dissipating it. The sky-reaching giant tree filled with black air quickly began to carbonize under the terrifying golden light. Its vitality was rapidly draining away, and it was about to turn into a completely dehydrated coke. City Lord Qin is indeed powerful. On the giant tree reaching the sky, the thorn flower fairy had watery eyes and said in a seductive voice, "It's just, no matter how powerful City Lord Qin is, can he still be stronger than the clone of a mythical creature?" As soon as he finished speaking, the completely carbonized giant tree at the feet of the thorn flower fairy suddenly had numerous squirming blood vessels rising from its surface. As soon as these blood vessels appeared, the giant tree that had been carbonized to death instantly came back to life. Under the gaze of Qin Chuan and others, the huge tree reaching the sky suddenly sprouted a large number of blood-red thorns, which pierced into the ground to absorb nutrients, causing the tree trunk to grow and expand at a speed visible to the naked eye, and in the blink of an eye it turned into a world tree that blocked the sky and the sun. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Accompanied by a series of crisp and ear-piercing cracking sounds. Countless pairs of bloodshot eyeballs opened on the trunk of the giant tree that reached the sky, looking at everyone present with terrifying eyes. After seeing Qin Chuan and others, the giant tree in the sky made an ancient and vicissitudes of voice. A mere city stronghold can actually give birth to 4 legendary creatures in just 100 years. I have to say that the evolutionary talent of the people on Earth should not be underestimated. Listening to this familiar ancient voice, Qin Chuan, the city lord, frowned and his expression became extremely solemn. It's Shu Lao, the only mythical creature in the Sun and Moon Holy Land. Such a powerful existence actually came to this battlefield in the form of a clone. Does the Holy Land of Sun and Moon want to completely break out a war with the Earth? Qin Chuan was puzzled by this. All along, the mythical creatures from the major forces have always stayed behind the scenes and never made a move. Just like nuclear weapons on Earth, they only serve as a deterrent. But now, a mythical creature came out from the Sun and Moon Holy Land and broke the rules. This made Qin Chuan feel unbelievable and a little frightened. If a person who obeys the rules suddenly breaks the rules by flipping the table one day, it means that this person wants to die. And the current unruly behavior of the Holy Land of the Sun and the Moon makes Qin Chuan fear that the Holy Land of the Sun and the Moon will break up and start an unprecedented war with the Earth. Although there are mythical powerhouses here on Earth, they are very few in number. Moreover, most of them did not stay on Earth. Once a war of genocide level suddenly breaks out, the Earth will face the end of being completely invaded. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A harsh sound broke through the air and suddenly exploded. Countless thorns covered with poisonous thorns shot towards Qin Chuan and others with a massive source of power. The speed was so fast that Qin Chuan and others had no time to react. The body was instantly penetrated by thorns. A shockingly large hole was opened. City Lord, save me. The deputy city lord Bai Wubian had his Tianmen pierced by a thorn, rendering his body unable to move. His vitality was constantly draining, and he was forced to ask for help from Qin Chuan, who was not far away. However, at this time, Qin Chuan could not even protect himself. His body was penetrated by 7 thorns, and he was as unable to move as Bai Wubian. He could only watch the vitality in his body being swallowed by the thorns. It's over. Dying. All are going to die. Qin Chuan was filled with despair, never expecting that he would die on this battlefield. The mythical creature is too powerful. Even if it is just a clone, it is not a terrifying existence that a legendary creature like him can contend with. If you, the Holy Land of the Sun and the Moon, do not abide by the rules, the mythical powerhouses on our side will definitely repay you tenfold. Even if there is genocide, you will be buried with the Holy Land of the Sun and the Moon. Qin Chuan, knowing that there was no chance of survival, used up the remaining strength in his body to stare at the Shu Lao clone in front of him and said harsh words. Hearing this, the thorn flower fairy on the tree elder's clone laughed out loud. City Lord Qin, the mythical creatures on your earth are now in danger in the ruins. It is highly likely that they will never get out. If they are to be buried with you, it will be your mythical creatures on earth who will be buried with all the people on earth. Hearing this, Qin Chuan opened his eyes wide and his face was ashen. After hearing what the thorn flower fairy said, he immediately realized one thing: the previous news about the ruins were deliberately released by the Sun and Moon Holy Land. The purpose is to trick all the mythical strongmen on earth into entering and then catch them all in one fell swoop. I was thinking about entering the ruins before and obtaining the evolutionary resources inside. Now it seems that the enemy took advantage of the weakness of eager evolution to design it. Just when Qin Chuan and others were all in despair. Bang! A huge explosion sounded from the dangerous area in front of gate number 1, across a distance of thousands of miles, to the battlefield where the creatures were originally legendary creatures. At this moment, all the creatures present were attracted by the explosion and sent their spiritual power in the direction of the sound to find out what was going on. Soon, everyone saw a huge palace hovering in the sky at the source of the sound. The palace was surrounded by water, and the 3 words Water God Palace were clearly written on the door plaque. Above the palace, a weak girl's figure floated. Inside the palace, there were continuous excited shouts, welcoming the return of the gods. Water God Palace? What is this? Why have you never heard of it? Qin Chuan and other city leaders, after observing the situation in the palace, had the same doubts in their hearts. And the old tree clone, whose original strength was as high as the mythical level, all opened his eyes wide and showed an extremely shocked expression. The water god has revived. At the moment when the old tree clone said this, the charred ground around it suddenly seeped out a large amount of cool groundwater, and in an instant, the entire charred land turned into a wetland. Not just here. The tree old clone spread out his spiritual power to sense the land within a radius of 10,000 miles, and found that the surface of the land within this range was seeping out water, completely turning into a wetland with sufficient water. Moreover, the water was still increasing rapidly, with a tendency to turn the entire land into a vast ocean. Realizing this, the tree old clone immediately shouted to the thorn flower fairy on his body and a very powerful alien from the land of destruction. Go, leave here quickly. Hearing this shout, the thorn flower fairy and the alien from the land of destruction looked puzzled. However, the tree old clone did not explain too much, and soon his soul left his body and left this place of trouble at a very fast speed. Having lived for tens of thousands of years, it knows what the water god means. It is one of the 5 elements gods. As long as it is contaminated by her water, the soul will be polluted indescribably. It is an extremely difficult ancient god. In a very distant prehistoric era, this terrifying water god had such a title that made living beings shudder at the mention of it, the god of pollution. An ancient god who can pollute other creatures. Seeing that the soul of the old tree fled so decisively, the thorn flower fairy and the stranger in the land of annihilation, no matter how puzzled they were, followed him to flee at the first time, and did not dare to stay for a moment. With the departure of these 3 powerful beings, Qin Chuan and others saved their lives. City Lord, what is going on? Shang Guanyuehua covered the blood hole on his chest and looked at Qin Chuan with a pale face and asked. Qin Chuan is the one who has lived the longest and has the most extensive experience among all the people present. If anyone understands what is going on now, that person must be Qin Chuan. When Shang Guanyuehua asked this question, everyone else looked at Qin Chuan at the same time, wanting to get an answer from him. However, Qin Chuan disappointed them. Under the gaze of several people, Qin Chuan shook his head and said, I don't know what the situation is either. He knew 2 mythical creatures in the Sun and Moon Holy Land, the old tree and the flower god. He also knew a mythical creature in the land of annihilation, the Lord of Silence. At the same time, he also knew about the mythical creatures in the northern region, eastern region, and other forces. But he had never heard of the existence of the water god. Which force is the water god? A mythical strongman. Why is even the old tree afraid of him? Perhaps, Only those who have reached the level of the State Master are qualified to know. Qin Chuan thought to himself. In the depths of an extremely ancient source ruins, Qi Qingmo, wearing a Taoist robe, came alone to a tomb that exuded the breath of the wild and stopped. It is not quite accurate to say that it is a tomb. To be more precise, it should be a mass grave. At a glance, all the tombstones that can be seen are tilted. Each tombstone is made of extremely pure source crystals, which looks very luxurious. Qi Qingmo radiated his mental power and carefully sensed the situation under each tombstone. Then he found that under each tombstone, there was a well-preserved corpse buried. No. It is not a corpse. These so-called corpses still have a very weak vitality in their bodies, so that their consciousness has not been erased by time and they are not really dead. In simple terms, every corpse here has the possibility of resurrection. This is not a mass grave, but a forbidden place for the powerful. Qi Qingmo, who realized this, became cautious instantly. She could feel that every corpse under the tombstone was very powerful when they were alive. If all these corpses were resurrected at the same time, she would not be able to deal with them alone. In this case, she had to be cautious. The tomb of the wood god. As her spiritual power continued to spread, Qi Qingmo soon saw a special tombstone at the deepest part of the mass grave. It was a tombstone made of unknown ore, with the words Tomb of the Wood God engraved on it. Just as Qi Qingmo was curious about what the wood god was. Behind her, a man's angry voice suddenly sounded, "Lady in Taoist robes, where can you escape now?" Looking in the direction of the voice, you can see 3 men and 1 woman rushing towards Qi Qingmo at a very fast speed. The biological pressure on these 4 people is extremely strong, and the lowest is the legendary 9th level Great Perfection. Among them, the biological level of the man in the lead has reached the mythical level. Escape. Qi Qingmo turned to look at the 4 people who attacked him, and said expressionlessly, "I never thought of escaping." The territory more than 40 miles away from city number 1. The water god palace was quietly hovering in the sky, and cold water was constantly flowing to the ground. All the creatures that were contaminated by this water were immersed in the water in a trance and lost their consciousness. As time passed, these creatures that lost their self-consciousness began to move uncontrollably, gradually facing Shen Qinghan who was floating above the palace, and made a gesture of worship to her. The flower vine girl, whose biological level was as high as epic, was in the water film that wrapped around the water god palace. Under the erosion of a large amount of water, her consciousness had been completely wiped out, turning into a walking corpse without self-consciousness. Like other unconscious creatures, she made a gesture of worship to Shen Qinghan. I don't know how long it took. The vines wrapped around Lin Zichen finally loosened a little. Lin Zichen noticed this, and immediately his blood burst out and broke free from the cicada pupa, regaining his freedom. The moment he came out, he found himself in cold water. He saw the huge mysterious palace in front of him. He saw the flower vine girl kneeling in front of the palace. He saw Shen Qinghan floating above the palace. And, he heard the excited shouts coming from the palace. Lin Zichen was stunned by the scene in front of him. He didn't understand what happened outside while he was entangled in the vines into a cicada pupa. Although he was full of doubts, he didn't dwell on it too much. He quickly used luck of melting water and rushed to Shen Qinghan as quickly as possible. Shen Qinghan was now floating above the palace motionlessly, looking like he had lost consciousness. He was very worried about Shen Qinghan's physical condition. P.S. Put the bowl, ask for monthly votes and recommendation votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 264 A Mythical Warrior. Kill him with one hand. Above the palace, Shen Qinghan floated quietly in the slowly flowing water like a beauty in an ancient coffin who had been sleeping for tens of thousands of years. Her long blue hair fluttered gently under the influence of the water, which was very beautiful. Lin Zichen didn't care to appreciate this beauty, and quickly swam to Shen Qinghan's side to check her condition. At the moment he appeared above the palace, the excited shouting in the palace suddenly disappeared strangely. Instead, a scream full of fear suddenly sounded. "Don't sacrifice me! I don't want to die, I don't want to die! God, save me!" This scream of fear sounded abruptly. Hearing the sound, Lin Zichen couldn't help but be startled, his face changed slightly, and he looked down at the palace below at the fastest speed. When he looked down, he saw an incredible scene. The entire palace below was collapsing rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. The collapsed ruins instantly turned into azure streams of light that shot up into the sky, all pouring into Shen Qinghan's gate of heaven. These streams of light were extremely fast, and they looked like creatures fleeing from a disaster, all scrambling to hide in the depths of Shen Qinghan's gate of heaven for shelter. The scene before him was completely beyond Lin Zichen's cognition, leaving him a little overwhelmed for a moment. He instinctively wanted to stop this from happening, but he didn't know how to stop it. He didn't know whether the entry of these streams of light was good or bad for Shen Qinghan, and whether it would have any bad effects on Shen Qinghan's body. He could only stare at Shen Qinghan's face, hoping that there would be no expression of pain on it. But in a moment, the entire palace collapsed. It turned into countless azure streams of light, all pouring into the depths of Shen King Han's gate of heaven. After the streams disappeared, the water that enveloped the palace, as well as the water that soaked the entire ground below, also quickly poured into Shen King Han's Tianmen. It took only a few seconds. The amount of water that was enough to form a vast ocean was poured into the depths of Shen King Han's Tianmen, and completely disappeared in this world, as if it had never existed. Lin Zichen, who witnessed the whole process, had an unbelievable look on his face and was extremely shocked in his heart. That was enough water to form a vast ocean, but it was absorbed by Shen King Han in just a few seconds? How did this happen? Could it be that Shen King Han's body was connected to another world, or that there was a small world in his body? Lin Zichen was puzzled by this. Although he was puzzled, he did not dwell on this matter at this time. Instead, he quickly calmed down, hugged Shen King Han, who was floating in the air, into his arms, and took her to a nearby towering tree to observe her situation. Deep in the ancient source ruins, Qi Qingmo raised his slender right hand, grabbed the man with a mythical biological level, and strangled his throat with 5 fingers. At the feet of the man, there were 3 shriveled corpses with only skin and bones left. The 3 corpses were all terrifying creatures of the legendary 9th level when they were alive, but now the blood and qi in their bodies have been sucked out, leaving only a worthless skin. Evil cultivator, you evil cultivator! The man whose throat was strangled by Qi Qingmo in the air made a sound with an extremely painful expression. He had lived in the source for so many years, but this was the first time he encountered a humanoid creature that increased its own strength by devouring the flesh and blood of other creatures. He was shocked and filled with fear. Qi Qingmo ignored the man's words, and soon he had an idea and ruthlessly sucked out all the blood and qi in the man's body for his own use. As the blood and qi continued to drain, the burly man was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few seconds, the man shrank from a giant of more than 3 meters to a hunchbacked old man of less than 1.6 meters. Skinny. Dying. You evil cultivator. You have brought a huge threat to other mythical creatures. There will be no place for you in the source. In the last moment before his death, the man stared at Qi Qingmo with his eyes, leaving her with such a threatening and cruel word. Qi Qingmo listened to it without any fluctuations in his heart, just slightly speeding up the speed of sucking, and in a few breaths, he sucked the man with a biological level of mythical level alive and dried him up, making him completely die. Who? Qi Qingmo, who had swallowed a lot of blood and qi in a short period of time, exhaled a deep breath of turbid air. Then, he calmed down and concentrated his mind to sense the strength of blood and qi in his body. Seeing that his blood and qi strength had reached a higher level, Qi Qingmo rarely showed a faint smile on his face. The pure blood path was completely completed, and he no longer needed to rely on the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the future. There is no need to waste time studying the so-called source of power. The southern region of the source. In a bottomless cave. A man with gloomy eyes and wearing a black robe was hanging upside down on the cave wall with his eyes closed. Puff. Suddenly, a liquid spray sounded. The man suddenly spit out a large mouthful of blood, and his face turned pale. His soul was severely injured, directly hurting his foundation, and his strength dropped a little. That Taoist woman is getting stronger and stronger. The man slowed down a little and said this with a solemn expression. He clearly remembered that when Qi Qingmo first appeared, his strength was only at the level of the legendary mid-level, but he had more tricks and weirder methods, and there was nothing special about him. However, just a few months later, Qi Qingmo actually grew to the point where he could easily kill one of his mythical clones, which made him feel very horrified. It seems that we have to notify a few old friends to take action. We must work together to deal with this rope girl, otherwise the consequences will be endless. The man murmured softly. After saying that, he took out a dark purple pill, put it into his mouth, and swallowed it in one gulp. The moment he swallowed the elixir, his pale face suddenly turned rosy, and it was completely impossible to tell that he had just suffered a heavy blow to his soul. At this time, a handsome young man flew in from outside, slowly hung upside down next to the man, and said in an anxious tone. Dad, why is Sujuju from King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain still unwilling to marry me? Didn't you go to King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain once to talk to me as a matchmaker? The young man is the son of the Night King, and in this 1000 cave, he is a person inferior to 10,000 people. He has had whatever he wanted since he was a child, and no one dares to disobey him. But now, as the son of the Night King, he was rejected by the saint of King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain, which made him feel particularly humiliated and angry. The Night King, the man whose soul was severely injured just now, said to the young man calmly. Don't worry, in a while, King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain will be completely occupied. By then, you can get whichever fox monster you want. Maybe even the mountain master there can play with it and experience it. Ichiban. Dad, are you serious about this? The young man's voice was so excited that he was trembling slightly. The fox demons in King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain are all powerful beings. Especially the mountain lord with the highest status, he looks pure and lusty, especially alluring. If you can let the mountain master work as a bed-warming maid and experience the various charms of the mountain master, then it will be worthwhile to die like this in this life. To die under the peonies is to be a ghost. The land 40 miles away in front of city gate number 1. Danger area. On a towering tree. Lin Zichen held Shen Qinghan in his arms and used his mental energy to examine her body, carefully exploring every place in her body to see if there was any problem. So much water poured into Shen Qinghan's Tianmen just now, which made Lin Zichen very worried about her body. After a very careful inspection, Lin Zichen found that Shen Qinghan's body was fine and all the data were normal. The data in the body are very normal. But there are obvious changes in individual parts outside the body. For example, the color of hair becomes bluer and the texture becomes smoother. When you rub it with your hands, it feels like you are touching water. It feels so good that you can't put it down. I wish I could stroke it all the time. In addition, the skin has also undergone significant changes. Becomes more juicy. It is no exaggeration to say that it is so tender that it feels like you can squeeze out water with just a squeeze of your hands, which is particularly magical. They say women are made of water. When it comes to other women, it's a compliment, but when it comes to the little filthy girl, it's a fact. Lin Zichen looked at Shen Qinghan in his arms and murmured to himself. After saying this, he remembered everything he saw before the palace disappeared. The door plaque of the palace is engraved with the words Water God Palace. There were constant shouts about gods coming from the palace. Shen Qinghan floated above the palace. Connecting these scenes, Lin Zichen couldn't help but have a guess in his mind, a guess about Shen Qinghan's identity. He guessed that Shen Qinghan's identity was the water god. To be more precise, it should be speculated that Shen Qinghan has the inheritance of the water god. In this way, it can well explain why Shen Qinghan's physique is so special. Lin Ziai. Just as Lin Zichen was thinking in his mind, Shen Qinghan in his arms opened his eyes drowsily and shouted weakly. When Lin Zichen saw that she was awake, he immediately asked in a gentle and concerned voice, "Is there any discomfort in your body? My head hurts a little, and my body doesn't have much strength." Shen Qinghan said weakly while rubbing his head. Lin Zichen continued to ask, "Will it be uncomfortable?" Shen Qinghan's voice was still weak and said, "It's okay, it's not too uncomfortable, it feels a bit like motion sickness." Lin Zichen breathed a sigh of relief after hearing this, "It's okay." Shen Qinghan sat up from Lin Zichen's arms and asked with a puzzled look on his face, "Lin Ziai, what happened during my coma? Weren't we trapped in a cage just now?" Lin Zichen patiently explained to her, "This is what happened. A sudden fragrance. Luoqiangxiu's rebellion. The rebellion of the masses. The appearance of the flower vine girl. The appearance of the water god palace. The collapse of the water god palace. All moisture is absorbed." Lin Zichen used the most concise language to tell Shen Qinghan everything that happened during Shen Qinghan's coma. After hearing this, Shen Qinghan felt very unbelievable and said, "You said that the huge water god palace collapsed into a stream of light, and all of it got into my Tianmen, and then water comparable to a vast ocean also poured into my Tianmen." "Right." Lin Zichen nodded. After receiving Lin Zichen's confirmation, Shen Qinghan's face was full of disbelief. It was hard for her to imagine that enough water to form a vast ocean could be poured into her Tianmen. The Tianmen is so big, how can it absorb so much water? The more Shen Qinghan thought about it, the more puzzled she became. At this moment, she suddenly found that her sea of consciousness had become much larger, and she also discovered that there was a huge palace floating in the sea of consciousness. On the door plaque of that palace, the words Water God Palace are engraved in a very conspicuous way. Isn't this the palace that Lin Ziai mentioned? Is all this true? Why can my sea of consciousness do this? Am I really a water god? Thinking of this, Shen Qinghan felt a little mixed. Get excited that you might have a strong identity. But at the same time, I feel a little awkward because of my identity, and I am not willing to accept that I have another identity besides Shen Qinghan. She just wants to be Shen Qinghan, the childhood sweetheart who grew up with Lin Zichen, and the beautiful young lady who just turned 20. She doesn't want to be the reincarnation of an ancient existence. I hope I am just a lucky person and have received the inheritance of an ancient existence, rather than the reincarnation of an ancient existence. Shen Qinghan thought silently in his heart. After thinking about it, she looked up at Lin Zichen and said in a soft voice, "Lin Ziai, I found that my sea of consciousness has grown a lot, and I can see the palace you mentioned in the sea of consciousness. That palace is in the sea of consciousness of the little filthy girl?" Lin Zichen raised his eyebrows and asked, "Can your spiritual power enter the palace?" Shen Qinghan, "I don't know, let me try." After saying that, she unleashed her mental power with a thought and skillfully let it spread towards the palace in the sea of consciousness, wanting to go inside and find out. Then I discovered that when the spiritual power was about to touch the palace, it would be instantly bounced away and unable to enter at all. "No, you can't get in. Your mental energy will be bounced away before it touches the palace. After trying several times but failing, Shen Qinghan said to Lin Zichen. Lin Zichen fell into deep thought after hearing this, and after a while he said, it should be that the mental strength is not strong enough, or the way in is wrong. I will have to spend some time to study it carefully in the future. Shen Qinghan said with a sweet look on his face, well, I will study more in the future. While saying this, she continued to exert her spiritual power and tried to enter the palace. But no matter how many times he tried, he always failed and was rejected by the palace. By the way, Lindsay, the palace we entered by mistake before was the palace with the teleportation circle and the 2 golden fruits. Could it be related to the water god palace in my sea of consciousness? Shen Qinghan suddenly thought of this, as if he had discovered some secret, and quickly looked at Lin Zichen and asked. Lin Zichen thought for a while and analyzed, it may have something to do with it, but I don't think it is big. In the previous palace with the teleportation circle, you could not only enter it, but also control the things inside at will, but now the palace in your consciousness sea you can't even enter the water god palace, the difference is huge. Shen Qinghan nodded, yes. P.S. Set the bowls, please recommend monthly tickets. End of chapter. Chapter 265 Luoqiangxu regains her memory. I am Bai Shuat. Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan sat on the tree and discussed for more than half an hour. The content of the discussion was the water god palace in Shen Qinghan's sea of consciousness. During this period, Shen Qinghan tried to enter the water god palace many times, but all ended in failure. The water god palace was like a forbidden area, and no living creatures were allowed to enter. Seeing that they could not study anything for a while, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan no longer cared about the water god palace. Soon they left the towering tree under their feet and flew to the front line of the battlefield together. Now the war at the forefront of the battlefield is nearing its end. The people in the city won a great victory and pursued the victory. The alien plants in the Sun and Moon Holy Land and the aliens in the Land of Desolation were defeated and fled in panic. Lin Ziai, we actually won, and it was a great victory. It's a bit unbelievable. From high in the sky, Shen Qinghan looked down at the battlefield below, watching his compatriots chasing the enemies in the Sun and Moon Holy Land and the Land of Desolation, and he was surprised and excited. Since entering the source, the information she received was that the Earth was at a disadvantage and the aliens were absolutely strong. With this understanding, she never dreamed that the Earth side could win a great victory in this war. Lin Zichen also said with surprise, this result is indeed a bit unexpected. When seeing that the city people won the war, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan were a little surprised. They didn't expect that their side would win. After all, the moment the two were locked in the cage composed of bloody roots, the city people were in a state of decline in the war at the forefront, and were suppressed by the alien plants of the Sun and Moon Holy Land and the aliens of the Land of Destruction. This is completely opposite to the current victory and defeat results. Lin Ziai, how do you think our Earth side won this war? Shen Qinghan looked at Lin Zichen with more and more watery peach blossom eyes and asked curiously. Lin Zichen could only shake his head for this question. I don't know either. When you fell into a coma, I was not much better. I was entangled by vines like a cicada pupa, and I knew nothing about what was happening outside. Is that so? Shen Qinghan didn't know that Lin Zichen had been entangled by the flower vine girl like a cicada pupa before. In her mind, Lin Zichen had always been invincible and had never suffered a big loss in a fight with the enemy. Now she heard Lin Zichen say that he was entangled like a cicada pupa. To be honest, this surprised her. The source is really too dangerous. In the future, you must not let Lin Ziai go out of the city to take risks. Well, safety first. Shen Qinghan thought to himself. In just a moment, the two flew to the sky above the front line of the battlefield. At this time, there were not many living creatures fighting on the front line of the battlefield. There were only body limbs and debris all over the ground. The reason why such a picture appeared was not because all the creatures participating in the battle died in the battle. It was because the battlefield had a victory or defeat. The alien plants in the Sun and Moon Holy Land and the aliens in the Land of Destruction all became the defeated parties at the same time, and they all chose to retreat and stay away from the front line of the battlefield. The strong men in City Number 1 wanted to take advantage of the victory and beat the fallen dogs, so they chased the two forces all the way and wanted to kill them. In this way, both sides fled and chased each other, and slowly moved away from the front line of the battlefield, leaving only a large number of body parts on the front line. It just so happened that Lin Zichen wanted these body parts. He quickly landed on the ground with Shen Qinghan. The former was responsible for devouring the life source, and the latter was responsible for searching the corpses for spoils. This process lasted about 10 minutes before it ended. Lin Zichen opened more than 30 alien atlases by devouring the life source of the alien race, and obtained the same number of biological attributes, and his strength was greatly improved. Shen Qinghan looted a storage item, more than 10 fist-sized source crystals, and several relatively intact weapons, which was a big harvest. Lin Ziai, Instructor Lan, and the others are over there, lying unconscious on the ground. Shen Qinghan sensed the presence of Lan Tianbei and others in an open space more than 10 miles away. Hearing the sound, Lin Zichen followed Shen Qinghan's direction and radiated his mental power, instantly locking the position of Lan Tianbei and others. Familiar faces such as Luo Qingxiu, Zhao Qingxian, and Zhang Tao were all there. In addition, there were several human-shaped cicada pupae entangled by vines. They were Zhao Zixuan, Wu Xia, and Fu Zhou. From this point, it can be seen that Lan Tianbei and others had been sleeping until now after being poisoned by the venom secreted by Lin Zichen. Otherwise, the few people who were entangled by vines into cicada pupae should have been rescued long ago. It seems that the biological attribute strength of deadly venom is quite high. I wonder if it can play a certain role on epic creatures. After observing the status of Lan Tianbei and others, Lin Zichen muttered to himself in a low voice. Then he got up and left with Shen Qinghan to detoxify Lan Tianbei and others. He put the poison, and he had the responsibility to detoxify it. On the way to detoxify Lan Tianbei and others, Lin Zichen opened his 5 senses to the maximum, sensing the situation in the area of dozens of miles. Mainly sensing the existence of corpses and debris, and swallowing them up when he sensed them. Unfortunately, he didn't find many corpses and debris along the way. It seems that the battle that just ended did not cause too many casualties. It should be that the high-end battlefield on the side of the city lord and his people had already decided the winner, which led to the quick end of the war, so there were no major casualties. Lin Zichen analyzed this in his mind. A few seconds later, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan crossed a distance of more than 10 miles and came to the area where Lan Tianbei and others were. Including Lan Tianbei, more than 20 people were unconscious on the ground. At a glance, everyone was unconscious and fell into an endless sleep. The reason for this is that the effect of absolute venom is too strong, which can instantly poison creatures below the epic level and have no resistance. Lin Zichen did not waste time and quickly detoxified the unconscious people on the ground. Once the poison was detoxified, everyone opened their eyes and woke up one after another. The fastest to wake up were Lan Tianbei, Zhao Qingxian, and Zhang Tao. These 3 were rare creatures, and their bodies were much stronger than the others in the team. It took about half a minute. The people who were unconscious on the ground gradually regained consciousness and woke up, looking around with a confused look in their eyes. They didn't know that they were bewitched by the fragrance and then attacked Lin Zichen unconsciously. The memories in their minds only stayed before they were bewitched by the fragrance. I don't know how long it took. Suddenly someone looked at Luo Qingxiu, raised the weapon in his hand and pointed it at her, frowned and asked loudly. Luo Qingxiu, what do you mean, why did you attack Lin Zichen? The person who questioned Luo Qingxiu was a young man with a biological level of advanced level 8. Before he was bewitched by the fragrance, he saw with his own eyes that Luo Qingxiu's elements turned into a ball of ice gas to prevent Lin Zichen from breaking the cage. He didn't know that Luo Qingxiu had been bewitched by the fragrance at that time, and everything she did was not her own intention. He just thought that Luo Qingxiu was an undercover lurking in the alien-level genius team, giving everyone a fatal blow at the most critical moment. Hearing the young man's questioning of Luo Qingxiu, the others belatedly recalled the scene they saw before being bewitched, the scene where Luo Qingxiu stopped Lin Zichen from breaking the cage and saving everyone. For a moment, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly became tense. Except for Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan, everyone else clenched their weapons, stared at Luo Qingxiu with hostility, and was ready to attack at any time. But Luo Qingxiu, as the person involved, was the first to be bewitched by Fen Fang, and had no idea what happened during the period after she was bewitched. Therefore, facing everyone's hostility at this moment, Luo Qingxiu felt inexplicable. I have said it long ago, those who are not of my race must have different hearts. We should not have allowed this alien to live in the city, let alone let her join the alien-level genius team. Zhao Zixuan stared at Luo Qingxiu with a fierce look on her face, her eyes full of hostility. In this alien-level team, she has the greatest prejudice against aliens. Because both her parents died at the hands of aliens, she has been hostile to aliens since she was a child, and she wishes that all aliens in the source land would die. Qingxiu, when Zichen wanted to break the cage and take us away, why did you stop him? Lan Tianbei tightly grasped the machete in his hand, looking at Luo Qingxiu with a cold expression and questioning. As an instructor, he did not trust Luo Qingxiu. Like everyone else in the team, he was full of prejudice against aliens. Luo Qingxiu frowned and said, I don't know what you are asking. I don't remember stopping Lin Zichen at all. There may be a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Ha! Zhao Zixuan sneered, there are so many eyes watching you. You said you don't remember stopping Lin Zichen. Do you think we are fools? A young man who was on good terms with her also said aggressively, Luo Qingxiu, stop pretending. Aliens are aliens. They will never feel a sense of belonging to the earth. Don't think you can fool her by pretending to be stupid. Another young man said, don't talk nonsense with her. Just control her and take her back to the city. Let the disciplinary inspection team interrogate her. With the lead of the previous few people, others also criticized Luo Qingxiu. The tone was very bad and full of hostility. It sounded like they completely regarded Luo Qingxiu, an alien, as a traitor lurking in the city, and they wanted to torture her now. Listening to the bad words of the crowd, Luo Qingxiu lowered her head, pursed her thin lips, clenched her fists, and felt particularly wronged. She had lived in City Number 1 since she was 8 years old, and joined the team of genius aliens in the same year. It can be said that she was a local who grew up in City Number 1. But even so, both the people in the city and the people in the team were extremely distrustful of her, thinking that those who were not of my race must have different hearts, and they were always hostile to her. And now, she was directly charged with a false charge, which made her feel very painful. She didn't want to be an alien at all, she just wanted to live quietly in City Number 1, and visit her master Yuan Dongji when she had time, and enjoy the few warmth. But why can't everyone satisfy me even for such a small request? Do you have to discriminate against me? Do you have to be hostile to me? What did I do wrong? Just because I am an alien, do you have to beat me to death with a stick? The more Luo Qingxiu thought about it, the more she felt wronged. She felt so wronged that her eyes, which had always been expressionless, became slightly moist. She couldn't accept that she, who had always worked hard in the team, was still being ostracized by so many people. Everyone calm down. Seeing that the situation was getting out of control, Lin Zichen said this. Hearing what he said, everyone turned their heads to look at him, waiting for him to continue. Luo Qingxiu did try to stop me from breaking the cage, but that was not her intention. She was just confused by the fragrance and couldn't control herself. After saying that, Lin Zichen added, after Luo Qingxiu tried to stop me, you also followed suit and attacked me. You were also confused by the fragrance. If you think about it, you will find that your memory only stays before you smelled that fragrance, and everything after that is blank. Hearing Lin Zichen's words, everyone thought about what happened before. After thinking about it, they found that it was really as Lin Zichen said, their memory only stayed before they smelled that fragrance, and they didn't remember anything after that. At this moment, everyone realized that they might have misunderstood Luo Qingxiu. However, despite the misunderstanding, everyone was still hostile and wary of Luo Qingxiu, and full of prejudice against her identity as an alien. Especially Zhao Zixuan, who said in a very firm tone. No matter it is a misunderstanding or what, we should expel Luo Qingxiu from the team and not let her follow us. This is the only way to minimize the risk. This is a prejudiced statement, but also a reasonable one. If you are not of my kind, your heart must be different. Based on these 8 words, everyone agreed to expel Luo Qingxiu from the team and did not want to go out of the city with this alien, lest she really backstab them one day. Don't be afraid of 10,000, just be afraid of 1. For this kind of thing that has a probability of happening, everyone chooses to take precautions before it happens, and directly avoids all risks in advance, so as not to really encounter a situation where the boat capsizes in the ditch. Don't do this, everyone. I knew her when I was very young. She is a very good person and will definitely not do such a thing to betray everyone. Shen Qinghan couldn't stand it anymore, and mustered up the courage to speak up and stop everyone. Seeing that his fiancé had spoken, Lin Zichen also said, there is no need to speculate about something that has not happened. Meaningless suspicion will only drive everyone to extremes. Let's just skip this matter and stop talking about it. Lin Zichen supports everyone's suspicion, but does not support everyone to speak out their suspicions and directly treat suspicions as facts. After listening to Lin Zichen's words, everyone tactfully stopped talking. Everyone has seen Lin Zichen's evolutionary talent. If nothing unexpected happens, Lin Zichen will definitely be one of the top combat forces on Earth in the future. No one wants to offend such a potential stock. On the other side, looking at the scene where Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan spoke for her, Luo Qingxiu always felt familiar, as if she had experienced the same scene before. In response, she tried to search her memory to remember her past experiences. As she searched, she felt a tingling pain in her brain, and then a familiar childish voice sounded from the depths of her mind. Xiao Chen, Bai Shui is so pitiful, let's go help her, okay? Guan Chun, wipe the water off Bai Shui's desk. Those who bullied Bai Shui in the past, come and apologize to her now. Listening to these childish voices that kept echoing in her mind, Luo Qingxiu saw scenes from the past. She saw the 8-year-old Shen Qinghan. She saw the 8-year-old Lin Zichen. She also saw an 8-year-old white-haired little girl who huddled in the corner of the classroom without saying a word. Bai Shui. Looking at the 8-year-old white-haired little girl, Luo Qingxiu subconsciously murmured the name. She remembered. She remembered all the brief time when she was 8 years old. She remembered that she, who was a loner, had a short but beautiful identity like Bai Shui. P.S. Put the bowls on the table, asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. End of this chapter. Chapter 266 A legendary master is seriously injured. Luo Qingxiu takes the initiative to come to the. Luo Qingxiu remembered that she once had the identity of Bai Shui. Just when she wanted to tell Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan about this. Buzz. 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 Several sharp sounds of breaking through the air came from the sky. Everyone looked up at the sound, and then they saw the ragged Qin Chuan and others. The city lord is back. This means that the battlefield on the side of the top combat power has won. Lan Tianbei and others were very surprised by this. In their cognition, the Earth side has always been at a disadvantage, and it would be a success if the city was not breached in this war. As for winning this war, they dared not even think about it. As soon as Qin Chuan and others landed, they immediately walked towards Shen Qinghan. Seeing this, Shen Qinghan instinctively shrank behind Lin Zichen. Lin Zichen guessed something. He guessed that Qin Chuan and others should have noticed the water god palace that appeared in the sky before, and saw the scene where the water god palace turned into a stream of light and drilled into Shen Qinghan's heavenly gate. As expected. As soon as Qin Chuan walked in front of Shen Qinghan, he said in a slightly respectful voice, "Student Shen, do you have time to come back to the city with me to talk?" Shen Qinghan looked at Lin Zichen as always, without any opinion. Seeing her looking over, Lin Zichen answered for her, "There is time." After saying that, he continued, "Can I go with you?" "Of course." Qin Chuan gave a positive answer. After arranging for others to stay and clean up the battlefield. Soon, Qin Chuan had an idea and took Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan back to the city. Other leaders in the city also wanted to follow, but were rejected by Qin Chuan, who refused on the grounds that they were asked to stay and clean up the battlefield. What did the city lord want to do with Shen Qinghan? If he wanted to find someone, he should have found Lin Zichen. What's going on? After Qin Chuan took Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan away, Lan Tianbei and others looked at each other, feeling confused. In the information they received, Lin Zichen has always been the best one. Shen Qinghan is also outstanding, but compared with the heaven-defying Lin Zichen, it is not an exaggeration to say that he is mediocre. In the spacious city lord's office, Qin Chuan sat at the tea table and poured a cup of hot tea for Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan opposite. After taking a sip of tea, he looked at Shen Qinghan and asked, "Student Shen, about an hour ago, I saw you floating above a huge palace. What exactly happened? Can you tell me?" Shen Qinghan did not rush to answer, and subconsciously looked at Lin Zichen on the side. Lin Zichen felt that since everyone had seen this, there was nothing to hide. So, he answered for Shen Qinghan. "What exactly happened, she and I may not know. But one thing is certain, her physique is very special, her water nature has been far superior to ordinary people since she was a child, and her abilities related to water are also outstanding. I guess she should have obtained some inheritance related to water. It is an innate inheritance. As for that palace, she and I don't quite understand what it is." Lin Zichen told Qin Chuan what he knew, wanting to see if the knowledgeable city lord in front of him could help him and Shen Qinghan solve the puzzle. He and Shen Qinghan were too young and didn't understand many things, so they needed to ask the old antique. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. After listening, Qin Chuan touched his chin with one hand and fell into a period of contemplation. Inheritance related to water? Or innate? Could it be the inheritance of the water god? Based on the words of the old tree clone before, the water god has resurrected, and the 3 words Water God Palace on the door plaque of the palace. Qin Chuan guessed that Shen Qinghan might have inherited the water god. However, he didn't know what kind of existence the water god was. He had been stationed in the source for so many years, but he had never heard of the word water god in the source. After a moment of contemplation, Qin Chuan thought about it and asked the 2 people, "By the way, where did the water god palace and the water wrapped in the water god palace go? Why did they disappear out of thin air?" Hearing such a doubt, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan also became confused. When the water god palace and the water wrapped in the water god palace were poured into Shen Qinghan's Tianmen, the scene was very spectacular and shocking. Neither of them expected that Qin Chuan, whose biological level was as high as the legendary level, did not see the scene. Is it that everyone can't see it? Or is it just Qin Chuan who can't see it? Thinking of this, Lin Zichen hesitated, not knowing whether he should say that the water god palace was in Shen Qinghan's Tianmen. After a short period of careful consideration, in the end, Lin Zichen decided not to keep Shen Qinghan's secret. He said to Qin Chuan, "The water god palace and the water surrounding it were all poured into her heavenly gate. The water poured in became part of her sea of consciousness, making her sea of consciousness grow dozens or hundreds of times. As for the water god palace, it floated quietly in the sea of consciousness. The water god palace first collapsed into countless dazzling streams of light before pouring into her heavenly gate. Such a huge palace, such a large amount of water, was actually poured into her heavenly gate? How is this possible? Opening up storage space in the sea of consciousness is something that only legendary and mythical creatures can do. And she is just a small rare creature, how can she do this? Was it the inheritance of the water god that allowed her to do this?" Qin Chuan felt incredible about this, and became more and more curious about the so-called water god. Thinking about it, he looked at Shen Qinghan and said, "Next, I will use my mental power to explore your sea of consciousness to see what is going on in your sea of consciousness. There may be a little discomfort in the process. This is a notification, not an inquiry." The moment the voice fell, Qin Shuan unleashed his spiritual power to invade Shen Qinghan's sea of consciousness. It doesn't matter whether Shen Qinghan agrees or not. This is the tyranny of a legendary powerhouse. No need to care about what the rare weaklings think. Lin Zichen sensed Qin Shuan's spiritual power and felt dissatisfied when he saw him acting so domineeringly. But one can only be dissatisfied. Although Lin Zichen's strength far exceeds that of his peers, and his evolutionary talent is astonishing in the past and present, in the final analysis, he is still a rare creature. The rare level is a giant on Earth. But in front of a legendary powerhouse like Qin Shuan, he might even be inferior to an ant. There is no strength to stop the other party's domineering behavior. Just when Lin Zichen felt dissatisfied and Shen Qinghan was a little confused. Ah! A painful cry suddenly came from Qin Shuan's mouth. Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan were both startled by the sudden cry, and both looked at Qin Shuan with doubts on their faces. Then, the two of them discovered to their horror that Qin Shuan, a legendary strongman, was actually bleeding from all his orifices and had bulging blood vessels all over his body. It looked like he had suffered extremely serious physical trauma. "Lindsay, what's wrong with the city lord?" Shen Qinghan was a little panicked. She had never seen such a scene before. She felt very uneasy for a moment and subconsciously grabbed Lin Zichen's hand for peace of mind. Lin Zichen also frowned with a solemn expression. Qin Shuan is a legendary powerhouse and a leader at this level. How could he suddenly and inexplicably suffer such severe physical trauma? This is so weird that it's scary. On the opposite side, Qin Shuan conjured a pill with a hint of purple energy out of thin air, opened his mouth and swallowed it. The elixir melted in his mouth and healed Qin Shuan's body injuries at an incredible speed. Just the blink of an eye. Qin Shuan, who had been bleeding from his orifices just now and had a pale face, recovered as well as before, without any trace of injury. After calming down for a while, Qin Shuan noticed the uneasiness on the faces of Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan, and explained. "The reason why I was suddenly injured just now was because I was attacked by classmate Shen's consciousness sea. To be more precise, it was attacked by the Water God Palace located in classmate Shen's sea of consciousness. That was an attack with extremely high mental intensity, and even I couldn't resist it. It can be seen that the Water God Palace in student Shen's consciousness sea has a great background, and its owner must be a mythical creature. This mythical creature should be the first two words of Water God Palace, Water God." Qin Shuan endured the severe pain remaining in his body and analyzed these with reason. Lin Zichen was shocked after hearing this. He didn't expect that the Water God Palace in Shen Qinghan's Sea of Consciousness was so powerful that it could easily seriously injure a legendary powerhouse. Shen Qinghan was a little confused after hearing this, and it took him a while to realize that he was excited. The Water God Palace in the Consciousness Sea is so powerful, which means that he will definitely be very powerful in the future. After all, this Water God Palace is most likely his inheritance. The inheritance from the Water God. "I'm feeling a little unwell and need to be alone to rest for a while. If nothing happens, you two can leave." Qin Shuan felt that his soul had been severely traumatized just now, and he had to rest and recover as soon as possible. Otherwise, it is easy to leave sequelae, which will cause you to lose the possibility of evolving into a mythical creature. Although this was a small probability event, he didn't dare to gamble at all. If he loses the bet, he will never be able to realize the myth for the rest of his life. He cannot afford this price. Soon, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan left. After the two left, Qin Shuan immediately sealed the entire office, took out all kinds of heavenly materials and earthly treasures stored in the sea of consciousness that could nourish the soul, kept opening his mouth to eat, and carefully refined and absorbed them in his stomach. I don't know how much time passed. Qin Shuan finally felt better. My brain is much clearer. At this time, he opened his eyes and tried to recall the entire process of the mental attack he had just suffered. The more he thought about it, the more horrified he felt. It was really dangerous just now. Fortunately, I exited quickly enough, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. If it were any slower, the extent of the damage to the soul would probably take several years of training to fully recover. What kind of existence is this so-called water god? How can he unleash such a powerful spiritual attack from just a place of residence? If I launch an attack, will I die instantly? No, after the soul is cultivated, you have to go to the state leader and ask. Also, Shen Qinghan, a little girl, must focus on and train her in the future, and give her the maximum amount of resources. Qin Shuan murmured unconsciously while refining the treasures of heaven and earth in his stomach. On the way back to the dormitory, Shen Qinghan pursed her lips and said, "The city lord looks very seriously injured. I wonder if he is okay. This makes me feel really bad." Lin Zichen disagreed. "What's there to feel sorry about? This is not caused by you. It was the city lord who forcibly wanted to explore your sea of consciousness without your consent, which led to all this. There was obvious dissatisfaction in these words, which was Qin Chuan's overbearing dissatisfaction. Shen Qinghan heard his dissatisfaction and thought it made sense, so the burden in his heart was not so heavy. After returning to the dormitory, the first thing they did was to take a shower in the bathroom together. The bathroom in the dormitory was relatively simple, and you could only stand to wash your body, unlike the dormitory in the school, which had a bathtub for bathing. After washing their bodies in a few seconds, the two walked out of the bathroom together. Then, they walked quickly to the bed in tacit understanding, and skillfully enhanced their feelings. After enhancing their feelings, the two hugged each other intimately, intending to take a nap to replenish their energy. However, before they slept for long, there was a knock on the door outside. Lin Zichen got up and used his spiritual power to sense, and found that the person standing outside the door was Luo Qingxiu with white hair, and he couldn't help feeling a little surprised. He couldn't figure out why Luo Qingxiu came to knock on his dormitory door. Was she looking for me? Or was she looking for Han In? What was she looking for? On the side, Shen Qinghan also sensed that Luo Qingxiu had come, and immediately said to Lin Zichen with a pair of clear peach blossom eyes, Lin Zi, it's my senior sister, I'll go open the door for her. Lin Zichen, well, go ahead. Shen Qinghan put on clothes and slippers, and walked briskly to open the door for Luo Qingxiu. Creaky. The door of the dormitory opened. Then, what came into the eyes of the two was Luo Qingxiu wearing a slim martial arts uniform. The martial arts uniform was very loose and inconspicuous, but it was very eye-catching when worn on Luo Qingxiu. This eye-catching look all comes from Luo Qingxiu's own beauty and sexiness, and has nothing to do with the loose martial arts uniform she wears. Senior sister, do you have something to do with us? Shen Qinghan looked at Luo Qingxiu outside the door and asked softly. While asking this question, she took the opportunity to observe Luo Qingxiu closely and found that her cheap senior sister looked exactly like Bai Xuet, just an adult version of Bai Xuet. You don't have to call me senior sister, just call me by my name Luo Qingxiu. Luo Qingxiu said calmly. Although both of them have the same master, Yuan Dongji, and they are each other's senior sisters, they have not been together much, so their relationship is not close. In this case, if the two call each other senior sisters, they will feel very awkward. Qingxiu, do you have something important to do with us? Shen Qinghan felt that if someone with a lonely personality like Luo Qingxiu took the initiative to come to the door, there must be something urgent to deal with. At the same time, Lin Zichen, who was walking slowly from the bed, also felt like Shen Qinghan that Luo Qingxiu must have something urgent to deal with, so she took the initiative to come to the door. However, Luo Qingxiu did not have anything urgent. Under the gaze of Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan, she said in a very calm voice. I remember everything about that short but beautiful time in the second grade of elementary school. I remember that I had a name like Bai Xuet, and I remember that I had a good relationship with you too. Hearing this, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan both raised their eyebrows at the same time, and for a moment they thought they had heard it wrong. The white-haired girl in front of them actually remembered the time in the second grade? So suddenly? P.S. Put the bowl, ask for monthly votes and recommendation votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 267 Lin Zichen and number 039, S Inheritance. Luo Qingxiu suddenly came to the door and said that she remembered everything, remembering that she was Bai Xuet, which caught Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan off guard. This happened so suddenly that both of them were surprised. Did you remember everything? Shen Qinghan came back to his senses and looked at Luo Qingxiu and asked. Luo Qingxiu's voice was cold, yet. Then, the scene was a little awkward. The three people standing at the door didn't know what to say next. Although the three of them had a good time in the second grade of elementary school. But that was 12 years ago. After such a long time, the so-called friendship has long faded. Not to mention, this is just the friendship of children. Children's friendship is the least friendly, the kind that can be forgotten after a few days, very heartless. Would you like to come in and sit down? Shen Qinghan rarely took the initiative to invite, I really miss the time in the second grade of elementary school. Let's drink tea and talk about the interesting things at that time. Faced with Shen Qinghan's invitation, Luo Qingxiu refused without a second thought, no, I just came here to tell you too that I remembered it, nothing else. After saying that, Luo Qingxiu turned and left, without a trace of wanting to reminisce, especially indifferent. Shen Qinghan didn't expect her to turn around and leave, and he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. After a moment of reaction, Shen Qinghan opened his mouth to call Luo Qingxiu to stop and let her stay and chat. But before he could make a sound, Lin Zichen spoke first. Don't call. Go back, it's just a trivial and short time in the second grade of elementary school, there's nothing to miss. Shen Qinghan didn't say anything, just quietly watched Luo Qingxiu's back as she left, feeling a little uncomfortable in her heart. She felt it. During the time in the second grade of elementary school, only she cared about it. Lin Zichen and Luo Kyungsu didn't care. It turned out that from the beginning to the end, only I took the friendship of the three of us seriously. Go back to the dormitory. Close the door of the dormitory. Shen Qinghan sat cross-legged on the bed, and asked with a hint of sadness, Lin Ziai, what do you think of our friendship with Bai Shui in the second grade of elementary school? Lin Zichen told the truth, it's just a small episode in childhood, I don't feel anything. Is that so? Shen Qinghan was even more sad. Seeing that she was a little depressed, Lin Zichen rubbed her white and tender feet and comforted her in a gentle voice. This is related to people's personality. If you are more sentimental, you will cherish every relationship, while people like me and Luo Kyungsu who are more indifferent will not care much and feel that it doesn't matter. But I don't think you are indifferent. You are very good to me and have spoiled me since I was a child. Shen Qinghan pursed her lips and said. Emotional indifference is a bad shortcoming. She didn't want Lin Zichen to have shortcomings. Lin Zichen is perfect in her mind. Lin Zichen said, it's different. We grew up together and have been together every day since I can remember. This long-term companionship is not comparable to an insignificant elementary school friendship. That's true. Shen Qinghan smiled, and it seemed that she was forcing a smile, but she was still sad. Seeing this, Lin Zichen did not comfort her. This is a personality problem, and comforting her is useless. In a blink of an eye. A few days passed. The battlefield outside the city was completely cleaned up, and life in the city returned to peace. In the exchange hall of the city, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan took the source crystals looted from the war and came to a window with fewer people to line up to exchange the source crystals in their hands for contribution points. Then, use the contribution points to exchange for the required evolutionary resources. About 10 minutes passed. Lin Zichen exchanged all the source crystals he brought for contribution points, with a value of more than 20,000. Everyone in the hall was stunned. In the eyes of many people, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan are still a pair of newcomers who have just entered the source area not long ago. But such a pair of newcomers can gain so much in the first battle they participated in. This is really amazing. Facing the shocked eyes of the people around him and the constant discussions, Lin Zichen's heart was not shaken, but he just moved to the other side silently and exchanged the contribution points he just got for evolutionary resources. More than 20,000 contribution points seem to be a lot. However, there are still more than 70,000 contribution points away from exchanging the cheapest epic level evolutionary resources. The cheapest epic level resource starts at 100,000 contribution points. In the later stage of evolution, the required evolutionary resources are really exponentially increasing. Alas, it's too difficult. Lin Zichen sighed in his heart. Afterwards, all the more than 20,000 contribution points were exchanged for rare level evolutionary resources, all of which were exotic fruits that can improve blood and spirit. Back to the dormitory. Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan each took half and ate all the rare level exotic fruits they exchanged, leaving no one behind. After eating more than 10 rare fruits in a row, a text prompt message slowly emerged from the void. Your biological level has successfully evolved from rare level 3 to rare level 6 /. Chapter 268 My sister is as brisk as a rocket. The physique of my parents. Source, King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain. The quiet and peaceful forest in the past is now in chaos and noisy. Wherever you look, black fog is everywhere and thorns and vines are everywhere. Old tree, Lord Ji, you too want to come to my King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain as guests. I welcome you very much, but you summon so many thorns and vines in my King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain, making my King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain full of black fog. What does this mean? A graceful nine-tailed fox girl hovered high in front of the two strong men who came with bad intentions, and asked tenderly. Although she was questioning, her voice did not sound angry, which made the listeners feel relaxed and happy. It doesn't mean anything. I just want to borrow the fox girls of your King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain to help the creatures in my land of silence improve their strength through dual cultivation. The man called Lord Ji said in a hoarse and lifeless voice. Hearing this, the owner of King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain, the nine-tailed fox girl who had just spoken so tenderly, suddenly looked gloomy. She was no longer as tender as before, her eyes suddenly became cold, and she was ready for a big fight. Master, there is no need to be so hostile to us. We will not borrow the fox girl from your King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain for nothing. We will exchange her with equivalent evolutionary resources. A man in a green robe said to the owner of King Kaiyu Fox Mountain with a kind smile. The man was the tree elder in the Sun and Moon Holy Land. He was a mythical creature who had lived for countless epochs and was so powerful that he could roam the Source Land. He was the top combat force in the Source Land. My King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain can be self-sufficient and does not need the evolutionary resources of the Sun and Moon Holy Land. The owner of King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain refused without hesitation. The tree elder still smiled. Don't you want to consider it? Don't consider it, please go back. Sumai Xiao, the owner of King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain, said in a very firm tone. It's called borrowing, but in fact it's just taking it back to be used as a bed slave. As the master of the mountain, she couldn't let her mountain people become bed slaves of other creatures. Hearing this answer, the smile on the face of the old tree faded, and his eyes became indifferent. The next second. Buzz. 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 Accompanied by such a burst of air-breaking sounds. Countless thorns with poisonous spikes instantly soared into the sky, and shot towards Sumai Xiao in the sky at a speed that even the divine sense could not perceive. The path passed by the thorns left shocking cracks in the air, revealing a dark and lifeless void space. At the moment when the thorns soared into the sky, the black fog that permeated the surroundings suddenly became thicker, as black as ink, and quickly rose to the sky and a black rain fell. Seeing that the old tree and the Master of Silence took action without saying a word, Sumai Xiao knew that she could not escape this disaster today. So, she was ruthless and decisively sacrificed the vast source of power contained in her consciousness, instantly activating the huge mountain protection formation to resist the joint attack of the old man and the Master of Silence. At the moment when the mountain protection formation was activated, countless purple lights rose from the ground and condensed into a layer of purple light film in an instant, blocking the incoming thorns and black rain outside the mountain. Seeing this, the old man and the Master of Silence immediately increased the intensity of their attacks and enchanted their own attack methods. Buzz. 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 The thorns surrounded by mysterious runes, with the power to tear apart the space, shot at the light film at a high speed like a soul chain. The thick black fog rose to the sky in the blink of an eye to form a thundercloud that covered the entire King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain in darkness with the momentum of covering the sky and the sun, and suddenly struck a lightning column that was enough to illuminate the entire King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain. Boom! There was only a shocking sound. The thorns and the lightning pillars simultaneously hit the light film on the surface of the King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain, and an extremely terrifying aftermath erupted, shaking the entire southern region and causing thick smoke to billow everywhere. After a while, the thick smoke dissipated. The light film on the King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain was intact, but the color faded a little. It was very faint, and it was not noticeable without careful perception. It can actually block our attack. This King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain's mountain protection formation has something. The Lord of Silence said with empty eyes looking at the light film below. The old tree chuckled and said, after all, it was the formation set up by the old guy in the east region, and the strength is acceptable. After saying that, he added, but it's just okay. As long as we continue to attack, this so-called mountain protection formation can't last long. The Lord of Silence agreed with this, and soon attacked the light film below again, thinking of capturing the King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain as soon as possible to avoid changes. Seeing this, the old tree also attacked together. Boom! 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 The sound of the source power exploding on the light film rang out one after another. The purple light on the light film was dimming at a speed visible to the naked eye. As time went on, the light film would sooner or later break and shatter. Sumai Xiao, who was inside the light film, could only keep consuming the source power to reinforce the light film. But she knew very well that she could not hold on for long. If she wanted to defend King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain, she had to find a strong rescuer before the light film broke. Thinking of this, she immediately had an idea and sent a message to the saint she valued the most. Juju, activate the teleportation circle in my room and leave the ancient mountain. Go to the eastern region to find that ruthless old thing to come to rescue. He said that the holy land of the sun and moon and the land of nirvana want to capture the ancient mountain of King Kaiyu, so let him come as soon as possible. When she was delivering a message to the saint, the Shu Lao outside the mountain guarding formation, while attacking the light film with all his strength, said to Lord Ji, by the way, a strange thing happened when I controlled the clone to attack the number 1 city on earth. Lord Ji, what's weird? Shu Lao, the water god seems to have revived, and the location of his revival is over city no 1. Lord Ji frowned slightly. The water god is the oldest and most mysterious god in the eastern region. He was born in the eastern region and died in the eastern region. If he wants to revive, he will also revive in the eastern region. How can he be revived in the southern region? Shu Lao said in a vicissitudes of voice, that's why I said it was a strange thing. After successfully capturing King Kaiyu Ancient Mountain, you can go back to the land of Nirvana and observe the sky at night with the 10,000 life compass to observe the direction of the 5 elements. Earth. Shanghai University. Family area. Lin Zichen turned his head to look at Shen Qinghan beside him and asked, are you sure you don't want to go home to see your parents first? I want to see Ying Ying first. Shen Qinghan said with clear beautiful eyes. Lin Zichen joked, every time you come back, you come to my house first. If your parents find out, I'm afraid they will be jealous and feel uncomfortable. No, my parents are very generous. Love is selfish. Oh, you're so annoying. Shen Qinghan couldn't stand it anymore and didn't want to deal with this annoying guy like Lin Zichen. Lin Zisai saw that she was annoyed, so he stopped teasing her. Soon, the two of them opened the door, skillfully put on the slippers on the shoe rack at the door, and walked slowly to the living room. As soon as I walked into the living room, I saw a baby girl wearing a diaper running around the room. Run fast! As energetic as a 5 or 6-year-old child. However, the baby girl is only 2 months old now. Lin Zichen, Yingying is so amazing. She can walk as fast as flying when she is only 2 months old. This physical talent is really too exaggerated, just like those sons of gods who were born with holy bodies in mythical stories. Shen Qinghan looked at the baby girl running around the room, her pretty face full of shock and disbelief. Lin Zichen was equally shocked. Although before returning home, he had thought that his sister could run and jump now. But when he saw this scene with his own eyes, he was deeply shocked and felt extremely unreal. His younger sister Lin Zichen is much more powerful than he was when he was a child. At this time, Lin Zichen, who was running around the room, saw the two people standing in the corridor. The moment she saw the two of them, she stood there blankly for a moment, then opened her mouth and howled loudly. At only 2 months old, she had already forgotten who Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan were. For a 2-month-old baby, as long as he has not seen him for more than 3 days, he is a stranger, and he will be frightened and cry when he sees him. Neither Lin Zichen nor Shen Qinghan expected Lin Zichen to cry. The moment the cries started to sound, both of them were stunned and a little at a loss for a moment. Soon, there was a rush of footsteps in the side room. Then, Zhang Wangzhen's doting voice came. "Baby, what's wrong?" When the sound rang, Zhang Wangzhen appeared in front of Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan in pajamas. Seeing her biological mother come out, Lin Zichen immediately ran over while crying, bumped into Zhang Wangzhen's legs, and opened her hands to hug her. "Be good, baby, don't cry." Zhang Wangzhen picked up Lin Zichen and kissed her chubby little face. Under the comfort of maternal love, the baby girl Lin Zichen soon stopped crying and just lay on Zhang Wangzhen's shoulder sucking her thumb. "Mom, Hanin and I are back to see you." Seeing that Zhang Wangzhen hadn't seen him yet, Lin Zichen took the initiative to step forward with a smile and said. When Zhang Wangzhen heard the sound, she discovered Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan standing in the corridor. The faces of the charming mature women were suddenly filled with surprise. But soon, the surprise turned into annoyance. "Really, you two, why don't you call me first every time you come back? Do you like to conduct raids so much? Mainly I want to give you a surprise, Mom." "What a surprise! It's almost enough to scare you. Look how scared your sister is." Zhang Wangzhen said angrily. After saying that, she asked again, "Have you two eaten?" "Not yet." Lin Zichen said truthfully. While Zhang Wangzhen gently shook Lin Zichen in her arms, she asked, "What do you want to eat? I will make it for you two now." "No, Mom, you have a hard enough time taking care of your sister. Hanin and I can do it." Lin Zichen has great feelings for Zhang Wangzhen and does not want her to be too tired. Zhang Wangzhen disagreed, "Except for crying and peeing a lot, your sister is as sensible as you were when you were a child. She is not tiring at all to take care of her. It saves your father and me a lot of worry. It sounds like it will be difficult to take care of her because she loves to cry and urinate. Mom, you should just sit down. Hanin and I will cook together and make you a good meal." Afraid that Zhang Wangzhen would not agree, Lin Zichen added, "Hanin and I brought a lot of special ingredients from the source. You don't know how to handle these ingredients." Seeing that her son was already talking about this, Zhang Wangzhen could no longer compete with her to cook, so she let her son and his wife to be cook. "By the way, where's Dad?" Lin Zichen found that Lin Yanzheng was not at home and asked in confusion. "Zhang Wangzhen, your father went to the annual meeting. The book he wrote this year performed very well. He was invited by the website to attend the annual meeting in Kyoto. He will be back in 2 days." Lin Zichen smiled, "Then Dad will not be able to eat the food cooked by me and Hanin." Zhang Wangzhen did not respond to this, but said softly to Lin Zichen who was holding her in her arms, "Baby, this is your brother and sister-in-law. You were still very attached to them last month. How come you forgot them so quickly?" Lin Zichen looked at the scene in front of him, and a touch of nostalgia appeared on his face. He recalled that when he was still a baby, Zhang Wangzhen also held him like this and talked softly all day long. In the blink of an eye, 20 years have passed. He has grown up. And his mother Zhang Wangzhen looks obviously older. Although she still looks very beautiful, the lines on her face are much more obvious. Not as tender as in her 20s. Mom is old. No, I can't let Mom grow old. In the future, I have to collect more exotic flowers and fruits that can beautify and nourish my mother, so that Mom will always be young. And for Dad, I have to get more exotic flowers and fruits that can strengthen his body for him to eat." Lin Zichen thought silently in his heart, very filial. After a while. Soon, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan went to the kitchen to cook. After about an hour, the meal was ready. 4 dishes and 1 soup. 2 meat dishes and 2 vegetarian dishes. During the meal, Zhang Wangzhen praised the food and said that Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan's cooking skills were really good. It would be great if she could eat the food they cooked every day. Shen Qinghan kept picking up dishes for Zhang Wangzhen and said that she would cook whenever she was at home in the future. Zhang Wangzhen smiled as she heard this, and she liked Shen Qinghan, the future daughter-in-law who was not a daughter but better than a daughter, more and more. On the other side, Lin Zichen stared at his sister Lin Zichen the whole time. My sister, who is only 2 months old, eats like a hungry wolf. She keeps stuffing rice into her mouth with a spoon in one hand and takes a bite of a braised beast leg in the other hand. She can run and jump. She loves to cry and pee. She has a big appetite. She looks like a simple-minded, well-developed iron fool. However, my sister is only 2 months old now. What kind of brains can she have at such a young age? Lin Zichen thought about these things in his mind. As he thought about it, he became more and more confused and puzzled. My parents are ordinary people. How did they give birth to me and my sister, who have such extraordinary evolutionary talents? Could it be a genetic mutation? But it is impossible for 2 genetic mutations to mutate in a row. The probability is too low, almost 0. Is there a possibility that my parents are actually hidden masters disguised as ordinary people? Thinking of this, Lin Zichen immediately dispersed his mental power to explore Zhang Wangzhen's body. Let's see if there is anything special about Zhang Wangzhen's body. Soon, Lin Zichen's spiritual power all flowed smoothly into Zhang Wangzhen's body. It turned into a warm current, slowly flowing around her body. Carefully check every cell, every gene sequence, to see if there is anything special. P.S. Put the bowl on the table, and ask for monthly votes and recommendation tickets. End of this chapter. Chapter 269, Extraordinary Parents. Giant butterfly from the abyss. From the brain at the top, to the upper body, to the lower body at the bottom. Lin Zichen examined Zhang Wangzhen's body very carefully to see what was so special about the body of this great mother who gave birth to him and Lin Zichen, that she could actually give birth to 2 geniuses with incredible evolutionary talents. Check it carefully. Lin Zichen discovered that Zhang Wangzhen's body was very ordinary, nothing special at all. Ordinary blood strength. Ordinary mental intensity. All attribute values are very ordinary. Is he really just an ordinary person? Lin Zichen murmured in his heart that he was not surprised by the test results. He and Zhang Wangzhen have lived under the same roof for so long. If Zhang Wangzhen is really a reclusive master, he should have discovered something fishy long ago. Especially in infancy. Because no hidden master would act in front of a baby. This is completely unnecessary. Unless, this hidden master knows that this baby is not a baby. The more I think about it, the more outrageous it becomes. Impossible. Just when Lin Zichen believed that his biological mother Zhang Wangzhen was an ordinary person. Suddenly, the mental power remaining in Zhang Wangzhen's body sensed an extremely terrifying energy body. The location of this energy body is the deepest part of the brain, which is the sea of consciousness of living things. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. What's going on? After sensing the vastness of the energy body, Lin Zichen was a little confused. The sea of consciousness is almost 0 for ordinary people. But at this moment, Zhang Wangzhen's sea of consciousness contained such vast energy, which made him feel unbelievable. After a moment of recovery, Lin Zichen immediately concentrated his energy and slowly invaded Zhang Wangzhen's sea of consciousness to see what was going on inside. The process of intrusion is very slow. He was afraid that going too fast would damage Zhang Wangzhen's sea of consciousness. However, this worry turned into shock in the next second. When mental power invaded Zhang Wangzhen's sea of consciousness, Lin Zichen saw an extremely shocking scene, which was so shocking that he would never forget it in his life. Zhang Wangzhen's sea of consciousness was endless, so big that it exceeded his cognition, and there was not a drop of water in it. Instead, it was filled with hard and smooth ice. It looked like a lake with a thick layer of ice in winter. But the difference is that the lake in winter is only covered with a thick layer of ice on the surface, while Zhang Wangzhen's sea of consciousness is iced to the bottom, and the entire sea of consciousness is covered with thick ice. Wrong. Not ice cubes. It's Yuan Jing. Damn, the sea of consciousness is a huge, boundless source crystal. Lin Zichen suddenly noticed this and was so shocked that he unconsciously opened his mouth wide and his eyes widened with disbelief. How high-level a creature must be to possess such a large source crystal? Also, isn't the source crystal a product of the source land? Why the hell is there a source crystal in the sea of consciousness? Could it be that Mom is from the place of origin? The more Lin Zichen thought about it, the more shocked he became, and it was hard to accept it for a while. In his heart, Zhang Wangzhen has always been an ordinary mother. Now that this happened, it felt very sudden to him. Seeing the shocked look on his face, Zhang Wangzhen couldn't help but wonder, "Son, why did you suddenly open your mouth and eyes wide? What are you doing?" "Nothing." Lin Zichen came back to his senses after hearing the sound, and said something perfunctory as if nothing had happened. After finishing speaking, he hesitated for a moment, and finally couldn't help but ask, Mom, when you were young, were you a rich lady in trouble, with a very powerful family? Zhang Wangzhen was a little confused by the question. She was confused for a moment and then complained, what nonsense are you talking about? Mom is very ordinary except for her good looks. Lin Zichen asked again, what do grandparents do? Zhang Wangzhen took out a tissue and wiped the mouth of Lin Zichen beside her, then said slowly, your grandparents are just ordinary farmers. Mom fell ill and passed away when she was very young. So. Lin Zichen fell into deep thought. He always felt that Zhang Wangzhen was lying to him. He really didn't believe that Zhang Wangzhen was an ordinary person. Thinking about it, he asked again, what about Dad? What was Dad's family like when he was young? Zhang Wangzhen was puzzled, what happened to you today? You suddenly asked so many inexplicable questions. As soon as she finished speaking, she continued, Son, did you watch the movie Catch a Baby and thought that your parents were testing you and training you, so they deliberately pretended to be poor and made you live a hard life since you were a child? Lin Zichen denied, no, I just asked casually. After meal, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan took a shower, and then went into the room to sleep together. First sleep that consumes energy, then sleep that restores energy. Lin Zichen was not tired and didn't sleep. Just quietly open your eyes and look at the ceiling. I kept recalling scenes from my childhood in the back of my mind. See if you can find some clues that prove that your parents are not ordinary people. After thinking about it for a long time, Lin Zichen was finally disappointed. The parents in my memory have always been ordinary, nothing special about them. We'll get sick. We'll suffer from insomnia. We'll get angry. Just a pair of ordinary parents. The only unusual thing about him is that he has a son with an incredible evolutionary talent. There is no clue at all. Are the parents really ordinary people? But what happened to the whole piece of source crystal in Mom's consciousness? See? Lin Zichen was puzzled by this, and the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. For a moment, he couldn't tell whether his parents were ordinary people or hidden masters. Lin Ziai, why did you ask Aunt Xin those strange questions when you were eating just now? Shen Qinghan was not asleep either. She turned to face Lin Zichen, and her delicate face was full of curiosity. Lin Zichen did not hide it from her, and soon told her all the doubts in his heart. You may not believe it when I tell you, just when I was eating, I dispersed my mental power to check my mother's body, and found that my mother's sea of consciousness was vast and boundless, and the entire sea of consciousness was composed of source crystals, like a huge iceberg. Ah! Shen Qinghan was a little confused and asked, isn't the source crystal a unique product of the source land? Why is Aunt Xin's sea of consciousness full of source crystals? Lin Zichen shook his head, I can't figure it out about this, so I asked my mother those strange questions when I was eating just now, just to see if my mother is a hidden master. Shen Qinghan still couldn't digest this fact. Aunt Xin's sea of consciousness is vast and boundless, and the entire sea of consciousness is composed of source crystals? What's going on? Who exactly is Aunt Xin? Thinking about it, Shen Qinghan quickly thought of Lin Zichen's evolutionary talent. I said, how could Lin Zi's evolutionary talent be so exaggerated? It turns out to be inherited. Aunt Xin must be extraordinary. Wait. What about me? Lin Zi's genius can be traced, what about me? Why is my physique so special? Are my parents not ordinary people either? Thinking of this, Shen Qinghan immediately asked Lin Zichen, Lin Ziai, do you think my parents are in the same situation? Their sea of consciousness is also vast and boundless, and is composed of source crystals. It is very likely. Lin Zichen gave such an answer, and then continued, when you go back at night, you can try to disperse your mental power to check your parents' sea of consciousness. When my dad comes back in 2 days, I will also disperse my mental power to sense what is happening in his sea of consciousness. Shen Qinghan suddenly thought of a question, Aunt Xin's entire sea of consciousness is source crystals, which means that Aunt Xin must be very powerful. Logically speaking, if you disperse your mental power to penetrate Aunt Xin's body, Aunt Xin should be able to find it at the first time, and then stop it as soon as she thinks about it. But why didn't Aunt Xin stop your mental power from invading just now? Shen Qinghan's question was a sharp question that stumped Lin Zichen. Yes, if Mom is a hidden master, then with the size of her sea of consciousness, she can definitely easily stop my mental power from invading. But from beginning to end, Mom didn't do anything. What's going on? Is Mom really an ordinary person? No, she can't be an ordinary person. The sea of consciousness of an ordinary person can't be so big, and it can't be made up of source crystals. There must be some unknown secrets in this. At night, Shen Qinghan went home to accompany Shen Jianyi and Su Meng. Not long after she returned, she sent a message to Lin Zichen on WeChat, saying that she had just used her mental power to check her parents' sea of consciousness. The result was very ordinary. Shen Jianyi and Su Meng's sea of consciousness was as small as sesame seeds, like a small drop of water. 2 days later, One night, Lin Zichen, who went to Kyoto to attend the annual writers' meeting, came back. Seeing his father whom he hadn't seen for a long time, the first thing Lin Zichen did was to use his mental power to invade his father's body and carefully check every corner. In the end, the result of the examination was as expected. Lin Yunqian's sea of consciousness was as vast and boundless as Zhang Wangzhen's, and was made up of source crystals. In this way, the identities of the parents seemed to be not simple. Realizing this, Lin Zichen has been deliberately observing his parents in the following days, hoping to find clues to prove that his parents are hidden masters. Unfortunately, after observing for several days, his parents are very normal, and there is no sign that the entire sea of consciousness is composed of source crystals. Seeing that no matter how he observes, he can't get any results, and finally, he chooses to confront his parents, pointing out the situation of their sea of consciousness, and asks them to explain what is going on. Facing his sudden showdown, Lin Zichen and Zhang Wangzhen both looked confused and said they didn't understand what he was asking. It seems that they really don't understand, and there is no feeling of pretending not to understand. For this scene, Lin Zichen was a little confused. In his expectation, when his parents were named in the sea of consciousness, they should all look incredible. They didn't expect that their secrets would be discovered, and then they chose to be honest. But the reality is that his parents looked more confused than each other, and they didn't understand what the sea of consciousness was, let alone what the source crystal was. What is going on? The days passed one by one. In a blink of an eye, time came to the 7th day since Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan returned to Earth. That morning, the two heard very unfortunate news. When City No. 1 was attacked by the Sun Moon Holy Land and the Land of Desolation, other cities in the Source Land were also attacked in the same way, including City No. 36 located below Shanghai City. When City No. 36 was attacked, most of the strong men in Shanghai City were sent to support it. Yuan Dongji went. Lu Juanmu went. Song Yuan went. Ma Zhenhe went. Those with high-level creatures were basically arranged to go to the Source Land and go to City No. 36 to resist the attacks of the Sun Moon Holy Land and the Land of Desolation. During this period, the weak City 36 was almost captured, and many people died. Zhou Suihong, the former president of the Student Union of Shanghai University, died. Ma Zhenhe, the current dean of the Evolution College of Shanghai University, died. Yuan Dongji was seriously injured and unconscious, and was recuperating in bed in the family. Lu Juanmu was also seriously injured. His originally weak soul was severely damaged. Half of the time when he woke up every day, he had a splitting headache and was worse than death. He was also recuperating in Yuan Dongji's family. Song Yuan was lucky. She only suffered minor injuries in the source and was not seriously injured. In the bathroom, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan were bathing naked in the bathtub together. While bathing, Shen Qinghan suggested, Master and the Dean are both seriously injured. Why don't we go visit them tomorrow? Lin Zichen had no objection and thought this suggestion was good. He nodded and said, then tomorrow morning, let's go visit Principal Yuan and the Dean. Shen Qinghan lifted her wet bangs and said softly, Lin Zi, you are so powerful now. Your biological level is almost evolving to the epic level. If you go to the Master tomorrow, you may be able to cure both the Master and the Dean. Lin Zichen was speechless, you think too much. I am just a little bit higher in biological level. I am not Huatuo. How can I cure it just by saying it? Soon. The two came out of the bathroom after bathing. Back to the room. Begin to improve their relationship skillfully. This improvement lasted all night. If Shen Qinghan hadn't been able to bear it, it would probably have kept Zhang Wangzhen in the next room awake all night. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. The two finally ended their relationship and both huddled in bed to sleep. I don't know why. Lin Zichen suddenly felt very tired. Less than 2 seconds after closing his eyes, he fell into a deep sleep and began to dream. In the dream, Lin Zichen slowly opened his eyes and found himself in a completely dark and unfamiliar environment. Where is this place? Why am I here? Lin Zichen didn't know he was in a dream. He frowned and looked around very vigilantly. Suddenly, buzz. A sound of breaking through the air came from above. Lin Zichen looked up at the sound, and then the scene that came into his eyes was a giant scarlet butterfly flying over his head at a high speed. This is an unknown creature similar to a blood butterfly. The whole body is red. The huge wings are covered with crisscrossing veins, and each vein is emitting a scarlet cold light, which looks very strange. Lin Zichen stared at the giant scarlet butterfly on his head for a few seconds, and his eyes involuntarily fell on the sharp mouth parts of the other party. He felt that the sharp mouth parts of the giant scarlet butterfly were very familiar, as if he had seen them somewhere. Thinking back, he found that the sharp mouth parts of the giant scarlet butterfly looked exactly the same as the animal teeth that Luo Qingxiu gave him and Shen Qinghan. So, the giant scarlet butterfly on the top of his head is the so-called giant butterfly of the abyss. P.S. Put the bowl, ask for monthly votes and recommendation votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 270 Zhang Wangzhen's explanation, Son of the Abyss. Lin Zichen looked up at the giant butterfly in the abyss. Up to 5 meters long. Up to 10 meters wide. The body surface is covered with a scarlet and cold light. The edges of the mouth parts are covered with thick, sharp fangs. The vitality in the body is very weak, so weak that it is almost impossible to feel the existence of life, and at the same time, it cannot feel the pressure of living things, like a walking corpse. However, its extremely fast flight speed proves that it possesses extremely majestic vitality and extremely high biological level. This life form is very strange and very different from known creatures. So, this is the abyss in the origin? The abyss known as the restricted area of life? While Lin Zichen quietly stared at the giant abyss butterfly in the sky, he used his mental power to invade the body of the giant abyss butterfly, sensing its life structure, and thinking about this in his heart. When he stared at the giant abyss butterfly also slowed down its flight speed, slowly hovering in the sky and staring at him. After staring for a moment, the 2 tentacles on the top of the abyss giant butterfly's head diffused light spots as big as gravel, floating an embellishment in the dark void, like a map of the cosmic starry sky, very spectacular and beautiful. Seeing the abyss butterfly suddenly emitting a large number of unknown light spots, Lin Zichen immediately became nervous, worried that this was the abyss butterfly's attack method. Just when his nerves were stretched to the extreme. Buzz. 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 Harsh piercing sounds exploded one after another from a distance. The next second, dozens or hundreds of giant abyss butterflies rushed out of the darkness one after another, and they all flew to Lin Zichen's head and circled slowly. Each giant abyss butterfly's body surface is covered with luminous veins, and its entire body is emitting little bits of starlight. Dozens or hundreds of glowing abyss butterflies gathered together to form a dazzling light that could illuminate an entire street. However, such a dazzling light cannot illuminate the dark surrounding environment. The surrounding environment is still pitch black, and you can't see your fingers. Apart from the glowing giant butterfly of the abyss, no other reference can be seen. While Lin Zichen was wary of the giant abyss butterflies hovering in the sky, he frowned slightly and looked at the still dark environment around him. He suddenly felt that this dark environment was very familiar, as if he had seen it before. After thinking about it carefully, I found that this dark environment is very similar to the void of the system. It can be said that they are exactly the same. It's the void where the system text prompt message appears. Is there any relationship between the two? Could it be that, the void of the system is the abyss of the origin? It's the place of origin again. It is also related to the place of origin. The consciousness sea of my parents is full of source crystals, and the void in the system is exactly the same as the abyss in the source land. What is going on? Lin Zichen was puzzled. Zixi. 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 Suddenly, there was a faint sound of rain gradually falling. The light points diffused by the giant butterfly in the abyss poured down from the sky like raindrops, falling below the pitch black and shining with dazzling light, and then quickly disappeared into nothingness. Lin Zichen, who was below, was hit by countless falling light points. Unlike when they hit the darkness below, these light spots did not disappear into nothingness the moment they hit Lin Zichen. Instead, it turned into a ray of extremely rich energy, which instantly poured into his body, entered the deepest sea of consciousness in his brain, and condensed into a crystal clear crystal. In just the blink of an eye, the sea of consciousness that was originally filled with water was suddenly covered with ice-like crystals. Lin Zichen took a closer look and was shocked to find that these crystals in the sea of consciousness were all source crystals. What's going on? Are these giant abyss butterflies above my head conveying source power to me? Lin Zichen was stunned and couldn't believe what was happening now. Just as he was trying to clear his thoughts. Crack! 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 The field of vision in front of him was suddenly filled with cracks like glass on the verge of breaking. Then, before he could react, the vision in front of him was shattered into fragments. His face was clearly reflected on each fragment. Immediately afterwards, his vision went dark, and he lost all consciousness for an instant. Zixi! 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 I don't know how long it took, but Lin Zichen heard the clear sound of rain in his ears. He was awakened by the sound of rain, and opened his eyes drowsily, and found that he was in the room. Shen Qinghan was lying next to him, sleeping soundly, and it was raining moderately outside the window. Were you dreaming just now? Lin Zichen sat up from the bed, his head felt heavy, as if he was drunk. He rubbed his temples and tried to recall the dream just now, feeling that everything in the dream was so real. Source crystal? Is there a source crystal in my sea of consciousness? Suddenly, Lin Zichen's eyes widened with a look of shock on his face. He discovered the source crystal in his sea of consciousness. Same size. The quantity is the same. Same location. Exactly the same as in the dream. Could it be that you were not dreaming just now, but entering a certain space? Is it the work of your parents? Lin Zichen suddenly thought of this. Lin Yanzheng and Zhang Wangzhen also had source crystals in their consciousness. Maybe the dream they had just had something to do with them. Thinking of this, Lin Zichen immediately spread his spiritual power into his parents' room, and the scene he saw next was completely different from what he imagined. Both parents were sleeping very deeply, and there was no sign of movement. The only one who was moving was his younger sister Lin Zichen. This little guy didn't sleep in the middle of the night, sucking his thumb while raising his two round little legs and kicking around, very restless. Only Zhang Wangzhen and Lin Yanzheng were sleeping deeply, otherwise they would definitely be woken up. For this scene in his spiritual perception, Lin Zichen fell into deep thought. Parents looked like ordinary people, and it seemed impossible that they were hidden masters. Perhaps the reason why the parents' entire sea of consciousness was full of source crystals was because they often dreamed of the abyss giant butterfly. Well, I will wake up early tomorrow morning and ask my parents if they have had any related dreams. After thinking about these for a while, Lin Zichen lost all sleepiness. He got out of bed and walked to the window to open it, sitting cross-legged beside it with the cool rainy breeze hitting the acupoints. Now, with the nourishment of multiple rare evolutionary resources, he has opened more than 100 acupoints in his body. They are 68 heart acupoints, 55 brain acupoints, and 59 body acupoints. Added together, the exact number is 182. He is very close to opening half of the 366 acupoints in his body. With half of the acupoints opened, the biological level of strength is only rare level 8. It is estimated that after all the acupoints are opened, the biological level is at most legendary level 1. If the upper limit is legendary level 1, then this pure-blooded human feels a bit useless. It is completely unworthy of what Lu Juanmu said about the hope of the future of mankind. Therefore, after opening all the acupoints, there should be other paths for further evolution. About an hour passed. The dark sky outside the window gradually became brighter. Shen Qinghan, who has been in the source for several months, has developed a good habit of getting up early. As soon as a ray of sunlight shone in from the window, she opened her eyes and woke up on time, full of energy. When did you wake up? Shen Qinghan raised her slender legs and placed them on Lin Zichen's body, and asked with a soft voice and a smile. Lin Zichen told the truth, I woke up around 4 o'clock. Shen Qinghan was surprised, why so early? Lin Zichen, I woke up from a dream. Shen Qinghan was immediately interested when he heard it, you actually woke up from a dream? What dream did you have? Tell me quickly. Lin Zichen organized his words a little, and quickly summarized the content of the dream and told Shen Qinghan briefly. Shen Qinghan was incredulous after hearing this, you said you dreamed of the abyss, and you met a group of abyss giant butterflies in it that supplied you with source power. Lin Zichen, source power is real. I have a lot of source crystals in my sea of consciousness now, all of which were condensed in the dream. As for the abyss and the abyss giant butterflies, these are just my guesses at the moment. I'm not sure if the place in the dream is the abyss, nor if those scarlet giant butterflies are abyss giant butterflies. After saying that, he added, I suspect that the reason why my parents' sea of consciousness is a whole piece of source crystals may be inseparable from that dream. Shen Qinghan frowned. He raised his head slightly and said, you mean, they often have the dream you had last night, so their sea of consciousness is a whole piece of source crystal. Lin Zichen, that's my guess, but I'll have to wait until my parents wake up to ask them. Shen Qinghan pursed her lips and said, if Uncle Sheng and Aunt Xin are both hidden masters, then they will definitely not tell the truth. Lin Zichen smiled and said, I hope they are both hidden masters. In this way, I don't have to worry about their safety in the future. Maybe I can even let them take me flying. Shen Qinghan was also happy when he heard him say that. It makes sense. If Uncle Sheng and Aunt Xin are both hidden masters, then as the future daughter-in-law, I can also let them take me flying. No need to stop working hard. Being a waste and entering the second generation happily. How great! Thinking about it, Shen Qinghan suddenly got horny and stretched her white and tender feet towards Lin Zichen. She teased him and said softly, Dad, it's not time for breakfast yet. Do you want to improve the father-daughter relationship? When Lin Zichen heard this, he couldn't stand it and said, Shen Wuhan, do you have to be so dirty? Shen Qinghan deliberately said coquettishly, don't boys like girls to be dirty in bed? Lin Zichen agreed, that's true. Shen Qinghan pushed Lin Zichen down and raised her legs to ride on him, okay, stop talking nonsense. Let's make a quick decision while Aunt Xin hasn't gotten up to make breakfast yet. Lin Zichen had no objection and agreed to make a quick decision, but unfortunately his strong body didn't allow it. More than an hour later, Lin Zichen and Shen Qinghan came out of the room contentedly. At this time, Zhang Wangzhen had already made breakfast in the kitchen and was bringing the cooked fish porridge out to the living room. Tiny Lin Zichen followed Zhang Wangzhen happily, her big watery eyes staring at the casserole filled with porridge, her mouth drooling, looking greedy. Mom, I'll help you carry it. Lin Zichen stepped forward and said. Zhang Wangzhen said angrily, I've almost brought it to the table. You don't need to carry it. If you really feel sorry for your mother, Get up early tomorrow to make breakfast and let your mother sleep in. No problem, I'll be responsible for making breakfast tomorrow. Lin Zichen agreed without even thinking about it. Zhang Wangzhen, like Shen Qinghan, is his favorite woman in the world. Not to mention being responsible for making breakfast tomorrow, I would not hesitate to be responsible for making breakfast every day in the future. After all, this is her biological mother, who grew up on her milk. Get out of the way, don't block the way, go to the room and tell your dad to get up and have some porridge. Zhang Wangzhen urged. When Lin Zichen saw her mother stopped and didn't move, she also frowned and stretched her hand to the casserole. This is to urge my mother to quickly bring the casserole to the table. She wants to drink porridge. When Lin Zichen saw this, he thought his sister was extremely cute. So while giving way, he suddenly pulled his sister into his arms and held her in his arms. He smiled and poked her chubby round face with his fingers. Lin Zichen struggled and screamed a few times in dissatisfaction. Seeing that Lin Zichen refused to let her down, her face suddenly fell and she opened her mouth like a dragon roaring, howling loudly. Seeing that his sister was about to cry, Lin Zichen immediately had another thought and took out a spiritual fruit from the storage space and brought it to her mouth. As soon as she saw the spirit fruit, Lin Zichen immediately calmed down, quietly grabbed the spirit fruit and stuffed it into her mouth. Lin Zichen poked his sister's little face and smiled lovingly, what a snack. After saying that, he carried his sister to the room and went to call his father, Lin Yanzheng, to get up. It was not convenient for Shen Qinghan to follow him, so he stayed in the living room to help Zhang Wangzhen get the dishes and chopsticks. Hanin, how far have you and Xiao Chen gone? Taking advantage of the fact that only the two of them were there, Zhang Wangzhen quietly asked Shen Qinghan this question. Shen Qinghan felt embarrassed, but still said the truth obediently, we have basically done everything a couple can do. When Zhang Wangzhen heard this, she immediately beamed and said happily, it seems that Xiao Chen is quite capable. He didn't disappoint me as a mother. Shen Qinghan was so embarrassed when he heard this, he lowered his head and made porridge without saying a word. It didn't take long. Including Shen Qinghan, the family of 5 sat in the living room to have breakfast. Halfway through the meal, Lin Zichen asked his parents if they had ever had any strange dreams, such as dreaming that he was in darkness and saw some giant butterflies that shed light. The result was as expected. Both parents looked surprised and replied that they had done it, and they did it often. Son, how do you know this? In my mind, your father and I never told you that we would have strange dreams, right? Zhang Wangzhen asked with a puzzled look. Lin Zichen said, because I have had this dream too. The parents were in disbelief after hearing this. They did not expect that their son had also had this weird dream. After calming down her mind a little, Zhang Wangzhen asked curiously, what was the environment in your dream like? Were you in a dark space where you couldn't see your fingers? Right. Lin Zichen nodded. Zhang Wangzhen also nodded and said in a deep voice, you said you just had this dream not long ago. Once you have this dream a few more times, you will find that your field of vision becomes wider and you can see a lot of things clearly. Can you see a lot of things clearly? Lin Zichen's curiosity was immediately aroused. Zhang Wangzhen explained, well, as you have this dream more and more times, the darkness you were in before will become clearer. If nothing else happens, you will soon be able to see a stone tablet in that dream. On the stone tablet, there are 4 characters engraved, Son of the Abyss. Son of the Abyss? Hearing these 4 words, Lin Zichen's heart couldn't help but move slightly. Originally, he was not sure whether the extremely dark space in the dream was the abyss in the origin. Now listening to what Zhang Wangzhen said, he was 100% sure that the extremely dark space in the dream was the restricted area of life in the origin, the abyss. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. Thank you.